Hello, my name is Emily Don, Head of Sustainability here at Avara Foods. I worked for Avara and Cargill prior to that for 9 years, working both within our agriculture team and sustainability team within that time. I've grown up on a family farm and both lived and worked within the Wye catchment, so this issue is incredibly important to me personally, but also to Avara as a business. We must apologise for not being there in person and hope to be able to provide an update on our roadmap and our approach to our roadmap through this short video. We would encourage anyone who wants further conversation to reach out to us, and we'd happy to engage in any further conversations. Before we get into the detail of the roadmap and our actions, I wanted to give a quick overview of our supply chain and footprint within the catchment. As many of you are aware who live within the catchment, we are a fully integrated poultry business producing indoor red tractor chicken for UK food service and retail customers. Within our farming base, we have 104 farms sat within the catchment, covering 2 countries and 4 counties. The vast majority of our farms sit within the Herefordshire County with 87 farms. We also have 10 farms within Powys, 6 within Monmouthshire, and 1 within Worcestershire. It's really important that we understand the map of where our farms are and the map of where that manure goes. In total, we have over 142,000 tonnes of poultry manure produced last year. We've been tracking this for 5 years and continue to track this going forward to understand that full life cycle of phosphorus within our supply chain, the inclusion within the diet that we feed our birds, what is excreted by the bird, and how that litter is used on land or within the end destination. When that litter is contained within the poultry house, it's not a direct contributor to pollution. It's only as and when that litter leaves the farm where there is a risk of pollution if not used appropriately. In line with our roadmap, we only have 30 farms within the catchment that are retaining their litter for land application as an important fertiliser. The vast majority of litter is sold in or out of catchment. We've already said we're not a direct contributor, and hopefully this short video will explain that manure flow through the supply chain.
Poultry manure is not just a waste product. It's a valuable resource that can play a vital role in sustainable farming. At Avara, we carefully manage poultry manure, keeping it away from the land and making it available to the farming community for responsible use. It all starts with the birds, who are fed a tailored diet of UK cereals and pulses, micro-ingredients and soya to keep them healthy. Housed indoors, their manure is combined with shavings or straw to create a biodegradable litter mix. At the end of the crop, the chicken litter is collected and leaves the farm. Typically, it's used as arable fertilizer, fuel for anaerobic digesters, and fuel for litter burners. As part of our plans for a more sustainable use of poultry litter in the Wye catchment, we're aiming to establish circular economies by diverting a higher proportion into anaerobic digestion and creating valuable products for local businesses. We will ensure that anything applied to the land is subject to higher standards of soil and nutrient management. We are a small piece of a much larger puzzle. When litter products become valuable resources, wherever they come from, they must be used responsibly to support a sustainable approach to farming. To find out more, visit avarafoods.co.uk.
Hopefully that short video will explain how the manure flows through our supply chain and give you a little bit more detail on our roadmap. To get into the specifics of our roadmap, we first launched it at the start of this year, talking around how we would reduce and mitigate any impact within the catchment. The original timeline for completion and implementation was 2025. Because of the pressures and the work that we've been doing behind the scenes, we have brought this forward to January 2024. The roadmap very much outlines the routes for litter that flow through our supply chain and very much talk around where that litter goes once it leaves our farm gates and our farm sites. It can take one of three different routes. The first is retention on farm for on-site litter burning or AD sites. As part of the roadmap, the requirement is that those sites take responsible management of the end product, so the ash or the digestate, in line with best practice standards. The second option is the application of litter to land where there is a crop need. So very much ensuring where there is a nutrient management and soil sampling process in place that demonstrates there is a requirement for poultry litter to be spread. Providing it can meet the Red Tractor standards, then this will be allowed within the roadmap. We've worked very closely throughout this process with Red Tractor in terms of pulling together and forming the soil and nutrient management standards to ensure that they can mitigate any risk and also demonstrate that those farmers using their own litter are meeting industry standards and are doing a responsible and appropriate job. The final option in terms of our roadmap is where historically litter would have been sold to third parties, both inside and out of the catchment, ensuring that we have full traceability and pulling together that sale process through one party to ensure that litter is sold out of catchment and finds an appropriate home when it's applied to land in a responsible manner, but also to litter burning and AD as well. As I'm sure you can imagine, getting to this point in time where we are today, ahead of that January 2024 implementation deadline, has taken a huge amount of work, liaising with appropriate bodies, working really closely with Red Tractor, but also getting wider feedback and engagement with our farming community to understand how we shape this roadmap and make sure it's robust and manageable within our supply chain. We'd like to thank everyone who's provided us invaluable support and guidance throughout this process, but also to our farmers who have a huge amount of work ahead of them and will continue to engage in this process and work with them going forward.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Patrick Lewis. Patrick Lewis. Give you a quick intro as to who I am. Usually, I don't have the facial hair. It is in a good cause, the Herefordshire Ambulance. So my wife didn't think I should come wearing it, but 5 days left to go. So that's who I am. I'm born, bred in Herefordshire, Pembridge to start with. I live in Hereford, 300 metres away from the sewage works. My parents live at Hole in the Wall. My mother-in-law lives in Ross, all of us on the River Wye. So I'm passionate about the Wye. The name Gamba comes from the Gamba Brook, which starts at Wormlow and feeds into the River Wye. And a grower group of farmers in potatoes was formed in 1976 as a cooperative, and it was formed as Gamba. Nowadays, we are potato suppliers, supplying a major crisp manufacturer locally with a group of growers. We got into chicken house cleaning in 2010, and in 2013 we got into poultry litter sales. We, in the last 5 years, took on a Christmas tree business where I should be going shortly after my presentation. So quite a diverse business with 32 people. Our longest serving member is 28 years, 74 years, and still going strong, although we have had 3 retirement passes for her. So, save the Wye. We want to be part of it. If we're not part of it, our business will no longer exist. And we are passionate about doing it. Historically, as Emily put in her presentation, a lot of the litter would have been spread to land by growers, and I'm going to say 90% of it would have been done totally legitimately. But appreciating we have a problem, and that problem has to be solved. So, from my point of view, what we do, we either ignore the problem and we lose our business, or we get involved So we got involved. So I turned around to Avara and I said, look, we can help you with your problem. Our business is selling chicken muck, and if you want us to get the chicken muck out of the area, we'll do that. So, along with consultations with Jesse, with the Lower Wye Valley, etc., we have got to talk about things and how we sort the problem. And if we look at the solution, the short-term solution is this, that we are going to move 80% of the litter out of the area, leaving 20% on what's called pilot farms. And these are the growers who can demonstrate that they can legitimately use litter. And how this will work, they're setting up a portal, and the initial thing will be full traceability. So if people would like to see it, they will be able to look into it on a read-only basis. So if we have a look, VAR will look at it, the EA will look at it, Tesco's will look at it, and be able to see where the litter initially comes from. So you have a look at the poultry farm, the haulier, the actual lorry driver will take a photograph of his weighbridge ticket on his lorry. And again, that will all be done by GPS, so it can be seen time and place. So that's the initial start of the journey. Then, depending on where that litter is going to go, so if it is going to go to farm, whether it be in the catchment area long term or out of the catchment area, there will need to be a nutrient management plan along with the agronomist's plan. So that agronomist will say to farmer A, you are allowed to buy 300 tonnes of litter this year to spread on your farm, because that's all your farm can take, and we will need a copy of that before we will sell him any litter. Now, once that then happens, the haulier will take that litter to site B, and often during the winter they will tip it up on a suitable area, and they will be hard standing, ideally under cover. And then when the farmer comes to spread that litter, one of the conversations we had with Kate is I got so far along in the presentation to her just recently and thought I'd done so well. She said, Patrick, the cherry on the cake will be the detail which is showing when and where that litter is spread, not by tractor driver Tim signing saying spread it, but actually GPS recognition. And the plan is this, that the tractors will be able to show where they spread by GPS tracking, and if the EA would like to go and see that happening, then will be live tracking happening. So that's the end goal, and hopefully that will be shown on the portal, and also showing that the litter can be used and managed properly. So as far as where we're selling it to, we sell a lot onto the Cotswolds, where they have a need for it. So myself and a colleague been on the Cotswolds. With the Lancaster University, they did a presentation just recently showing there's a massive requirement in Staffordshire. So we are actively endeavouring to sell in Staffordshire. As discussed earlier, a lot is going into anaerobic digesters. And there's a lot of anaerobic digesters throughout the country, either already in use and being built. Now, the digestate is the next one on our list to try and sort out. At this stage, we are primarily concentrating on the raw litter, but we will be concentrating on the digestate once we've got the raw litter side of it done. So digesters one, land is one. We are supplying and have just done a contract with Deptford Power Station, and those are a long way away, but they will be taking a certain amount of litter. They have a demand for it, so that's that. So we've engaged with Avara. We've come up with this plan with them. We signed the contract last week with them. So from the 1st of January, we will be pressing the blue button, the green button, to get this job rolling. So we've got A, B and C plans when probably bad weather will be one of the issues, but we can't get lorries out of the area. They will be delivered to undercover housing, and there are various old air sites out of the county that we can take large quantities to if we need to. So that's the very short term. The long term solution, as Emily was saying, is we get the portal working, and once it's working and everyone is comfortable with it, then there will be more litter being used sustainably and legitimately within the catchment area, but that's not until the green light is given from Wye Valley, from Tesco, from the EA and so on. So hopefully we are engaging with everyone, and that is the plan. And we all want to restore the beautiful Wye Valley. And I see the jug of water this morning. When I walked the dogs this morning, sadly, that would have had some white bubbles on top of it. So those are very pretty, but it's not what I saw this morning. Thank you very much.
There is a clear link between livestock manure and I think if we're going to develop obviously the manure is a source here, but the plant slowly pathways all of our land. Direct so these stocking when I talk about these stocking, the number of one or so how can we do this? So as I said, use the herd drop percent or you can use it for local features on there. Or potentially, because of the high risk land, if we have an increase in the price, or should we have alternatively, completely close to the farm, we can either do this voluntarily or planetary. If it's compulsory, it is farmable. If it's catchment, how do you target say 30% of it poultry, cattle, sheep, say little million who decides that for England, etc. Someone has to make that judgment to do that. First of all, who influenced it. I think it's important as well to be mindful of the consequences say we're reducing blood fluctuation. What else are we going to take that down for? We take out the gravy and become arable. It might reduce the surface after this, but we're going to increase the loss of weight in that manner. If we were to make potatoes, we focus also that we would increase the surface and the loss of water and the sediment. So, we get careful with it. The Farm Herefordshire Partnership the survey earlier this year, and within that, they asked the question who would invest in livestock jungle. 42 farms said they would already be there, 21 said they would like to, and 130 So I did a little exercise to work out exactly what it would look like. I looked at Herefordshire using the best data I can. So just for consensus, 21, so there are 17,500 beef pastures in Herefordshire. 36% of the Farm Herefordshire survey, so they were happy to reduce it. And I took around, yes, I think there was a number back suggesting not reducing by 4. So if we take 40% to 36, we have an overall reduction of 14.5. This is equivalent to 2,500 cows. And if we would standardise the density, the LU, the livestock per hectare, so that's about just under 4 cows per hectare. We will be reverting 4,000 hectares of land. I've used the utility calculator for river lodge FAT to catch exactly what we possible. So we could remove 4,300 hectares of loading grading, and since it's a wildflower meadows have no fertiliser before, we're going to reduce the tax by 8%. However, if it's for cereals, we are going to increase the phosphorus extra to the catchment by 1,800 a year. And to put that into context, current data for the Dutch suggest phosphorus loss of 8%. So it's quite a significant convert that quickly through the parallel. Also, the compensation is short. How are we going to, we can't just stop someone's income immediately. So if we're looking at gender equality, we expect to get an income per cow of approximately so if we reduce 2,000 per head, that compensation is £630 per annum. And second how we pay that. And also diversification, help landholders, other income. So the major barrier, I think, is the financial one. It takes quite a lot to invest, poultry units, livestock yard, serve that years and expect many livestock farms, they have limited financial capacity. We look at that, but what else is that land for? But are there environmental incentives that help compensate for livestock development? Currently, in the sustainable farming incentive, if you do reduce your nitrogen usage, negative, use what nitrogen at the moment, then you can get paid £140 extra, very high. Nutrient credit savings, this is where catchment and households that allow This is possible, that is treatment. However, it's unlikely of the table for future pension funds. And this is because technically the export does not occur as part of that fund. This is there have been brought of a grant to help with what to cover with some of this core funds. And a bar example is actually a significant issue. That's how. Also, for farmers, if we had a compulsory reduction, it would result in our parity and equality within and that's a certain If we're looking at national food welfare stats, 6% substitute costs at the moment, we actually import white breast, not so much brown meat, would be export. And if you restart the production, would we then third of the race of the for example, have strips from chicken, back-to-cage growth hormone and ham. The National Food Strategy and Food Policy, they're taken two parts, one, two. I'd just like to read out one of the key findings that we supported for food security rests ultimately not on maximising domestic production, but on making the best use of land size with dairy quality. There is a need to balance and integrate food production with environmental factors. So, if we're going to do stock, we need to control the number of animals in the catchment and to monitor this not just for a year, but over a period of time. So it's not voluntary, there needs to be a change in regulations, program to do this. For example, should there be a maximum? There was no plan at the moment to find production, for example, or only for the number. There should be and I don't believe there is a way of controlling these numbers. I'm going to talk, for example, the current one at the moment, Norfolk. So the map there, we have Norwich, we have a lovely pig farm south of that, map yeah. So eastward and right side of that map is the broad and so this is our little pig farm. It's highlighted in red. There are 30 hectares of 1,500,000 cubic piglets per year. It's proposed to remove these pigs from the land and to create a lovely boxland meadow ready to take houses. However, it is a part of new credit scheme run by the APA. The landowner being paid to revert the land doesn't actually own the pig. The land is rented. And contrary to the Daily Mail online, this is a pig is not it, so we across the river to be lodged on the other side. That's a clear demonstration of how hard it is to say, right, take those lives across that land to what you sold in house not be fully safe catchment. Even if these were, to the other side, taken out of catchment, what's stopping those dogs from north of that's bringing in another thousand. So it's really hard, and if we are giving that number, there has to be some kind of program around it. So, alternatives to stopping, once again we have to think about source pathways, source thank you about export. One other option to think about today is hydraulic biochar, then have to change that not mobile in the environment. Property actually highly insensitive. The only way people move around catchments is soil and other organic matter. So basically, if we control water in catchments, we control that pathway and disrupt it through but looking at source production, dietary, that was by is actually diet. And can we better manage urine catchment? I know some people are business and NGZ are allowed. However, being convicted from the water course, particularly high areas. You know, on a rainy day, 10 litres of evaporates about 20 seconds on a good flow, and I think that's really important with high risk areas who are better. I just talked about pathway disruption and mutually capture pathway disruption is easier to all of these this afternoon we're going to talk a bit more about other also drawing down that list. All of these quantified, so we can basically what quickly so in summary, the future store reduction can be achieved through talking. There's 5,000 tons of catchment, and we need to at least reduce the carbon. These does have to not impossible, but there are various financial alternative land use, that again we need to be a bit careful about what we look for and demonstrate that we take on such a great thing out of use, desirable, there's no current legislation to support control it, and from movement and alternative
And the speakers we have for this section are Richard Corbett and James Wright. Richard Corbett manages farms at the Ox House in Shobden and is one of the enterprises that comprise Herefordshire Biogas. Corbett Farms produces hatching eggs for the boiler industry, blackcurrants, cider, fruit and cereals. Through the Herefordshire Biogas venture, Richard is driving towards technological innovation to enable nutrient capture at their site. And James Wright is the farm manager at the Witten. The Witten has a diverse portfolio of enterprises, including horticulture, viticulture, poultry and renewable energy. James is a member of the Herefordshire Agri Group and the steering group for the original Coldbrook project. James has been farm manager since 2011 and is passionate about the environment and the farm's high level schemes. So without further ado, I will bring Richard to start the report. Thanks.
I'm going to try and talk about a very complicated subject in 10 minutes. Herefordshire Biogas was conceived in about 2011, based on 7 areas, two other parts going further, we got a lot of poultry litter, Queensland, who are very short event, really not sufficient supply. They were on green, the basic biogas, some wrong terms, shall we say, we got together and built a plant there. We've got a 19% very good. At the moment, previously, we realised some time ago that we need to change what we're doing. Part of what we've done right down with 36% of the UK green energy UK is to expand the replacement for the problem that we have so we have to look We also realised that if we went to expand restaurant, sustainable. But just very briefly, before most people are aware of this, those foodstuff mixed, they go into a maceration food about rest. Originally then the digestive luxury food that separated the knowledge of the nutrients, so both parts, so that the phosphate both sections, not necessarily good. Well, the gases enter carbon filter. That is the issues that we had to address, and obviously these dealt with are water quality of the river, managing phosphate nitrogen, particularly with the management of the house, but also the new carbon capture. So the solution that we landed on, and this is not absolutely there, but it's after a lot of research, running a large scale trial, then with mobile, so we bought the largest basically involved better separation of the digestion. If you look at the through the separation process, through the machinery, they separate the solids up, and you get left with the gravy. That grey water not you can also choose we have studied that's not so we're just looking at the one kind of thing in the solid matter that you saw was so you've then got a filter bag, final part of the water is surface. There is scale. If we look at the nitrogen, again, it's 14 kilograms of the separating process. Left but the no taking there's something there solid. Again, a little left and will be irrigated. So those are the results of the trial that was run. So we are, as we speak, installing it on the scale. This water that we can recycle is going to the house through the lemon pad and the wood and the source of which we look at from some of the good head. And that's reducing the amount of depth of the blade of the as I said in the first slide, we've gone from 50% to 38%. This is going to start and then go higher. But we don't the milling, feedstock milling line processes the food stuff going in, stuff in today's more part, breaks down the cellulose wall, which means that we can put more food stuff in there. We also get more nutrients, more energy out of the cell. We then got the two bits of things, centrifuge and gas, or that separation, go down that side. With the phosphate transfer out in the solids with a little bit of fluid, and then any further out out. So that plant is still at the moment. It is being commissioned all this good, it's not running. It's not finished off, the learning process, very much a learning process. It's starting very well. It will take us 12 months more to evolve the economy. We're pretty practical. The big advantage about it is that nutrients are very regular portion new phosphate goes to alcohol, bacteria, or other we report that acidity some. Sustainability is very important. If that process is started, you want sustainable. We're doing it through the handle. But it's not a process that every first on a farm rather than good. So in order to make it sustainable, the rule is that farmers make their house sustainable, the rule is so we want to expand our farm and we want to add processes that we're offering the top right before, which is to take the surface methane and turn it liquefied and methane exactly the same product as the imported liquefied natural gas that is coming out of Australia and everywhere else. So it's a road fuel, biofuel, Volvo sustainable, that running. There are big cars running on the other product liquefied CO2. Again, you're already aware that the current CO2 supply most of when there's a problem with gas supply or very high price. Sustainable stores use it here as well. The banner at the bottom says 18,000 tons of CO2 saved a year. We are, again, we have external people looking at this process. These are the initial figures, the saving from replacing fertiliser, replacing diesel, replacing CO2. The final bit of our leg is that phosphate-rich solid, which initially we have done to export. We're going to put that through a pyrolysis process, which beyond anything else, reduce the volume. So we return vertebrate type solid or 2,200 solid. It will be a precision solid with no nutrient level. Again, fertilizer will store the area of need within the food. And it will be a valuable product worth somewhere. But it will be a positive output program, not a very the plant as a whole, if they're able to build, will sell 11,125,000 most of it solid. Some of it there still will be farming it's not solid. The nitrogen oxide will be 9, 6, or maybe not nitrogen. Spider, roots, etc. So, very quickly, last few slides, we will hopefully moment of a blood action. We will be processing it responsibly. This place is important to reduce the nitrogen fertilizer displacement fertilizer. Capturing 80% of the ammonia would be less the nitrogen, so but I know agriculture did barriers. Far more foot barriers. These steps by one. Very, very quickly. Farm and project farm, live golf, and Wye catchment. Currently a home and intensive culture. And we've been culture producers since the early 1950s. We talk about Herefordshire Council and fourth generation family farm owned by firmly passionate about the environment, very happy. So when I started on farming in 2012, 2011 and 2012, we were just in the middle of installing new wood chip boiler systems to replace gas and oil in heating poultry units. We operate nothing 4,000 tons of wood chip. Into the 5,000 tons of poultry liquid sold off the farm to a local pharmacy. That is the product. Well, at the Gamba, there was a small group of farmers who take all of our liquor. As time went on, price of wood chips was ever increasing. Burning wood fuel was not. It was not economical as it was. Also, the issue of why was very much important to mind by maintaining natural electric. We were looking for alternatives and solutions so we started to look at litter burn, which historically the heating technology around some of it was limited to large producers that co-generate electricity and heat. Some technology was great. And DHSL came back to the market in 2019 with a redesigned litter burner. Have a look at that and say now we're thinking of DHSL. So in 2022, after subsequent times during COVID, project, in April 22, we commissioned one of our sites, industrial or litter. The main benefit is why we chose litter burning in that actually 100% phosphate from the litter into liquid. So the cooling type plastic. Fertilizer a lot easier to transport. And it's steam burning, so there's actually less emissions probably with burning than there are. Steam transport on the local roads to do that by not exporting the litter and not bringing it in 9,000 tonnes a day. Small roads and runs. It's completed by fuel, we're not taking culture litter off farm, out of the facility which is held under negative pressure. The boilers are actually storing all of the ammonia, anything qualified by that. Economically sustainable. The work, so these are the lift burners that we do to get up to shelf. On the left hand side is the fuel source, on the right hand side is the boiler. Down the left hand side there, the shelf at the end of the block, which are all the little tiles. You take it to the fuel source, so the boiler is open. We take all the litter out of one load, the fuel source. Inside the fuel source there's a top loader. The conveyor system there, so that's inside the battery. This is drawn automatically from combustion plant back to I was trying to take a photograph of this, but it's and basically it's, the combustion chamber is filled with sand. That sand is freezing to the open. As compressor is black to the bottom of the sand. And it's moving up the that's what gas or I'm telling you the other end, so we're taking a 5,000 and convert that down 500 tons of usage is half. Because the phosphate, there are 5,000 tons with a 15% phosphate, so to 7 tons. So, these are very, very good. Loaded onto the lorry. The product you see on the right that you're selling, we sell our app to the process technician. So that product you spread to send your fully traceable as well, so all of our apps, most of it is and a lot of red tape, and a lot of air quality, environmental. We're regulated by the environment agency, so have our emissions detectors here. The top half is the emissions detector within the wrong mixture. So we used to have three burners per site. So it gives the look at the nitrogen and dioxide and particulate matter. And if you add three of those numbers on top, you can choose one of the little burner on the bottom. 36 net nitrogen dioxide for this burning and 85% net. So moving to little burners is not cheap, it's in a plant just over 1 million we just got in on time with the new heating centre. So therefore our return on investment to 11 million. Directly. Yeah. It's really good, but you see that even the 50 hours far away, so there is no hours far now. That would be well into 20 hours. So just to quickly summarise some of the 11 we see it's a very useful tool in the wide structure to remove toxins from the catchment. But it's fully traceable. The limiting factor there is that we would use that possibly with larger units, centralizing power and solving problems that we've got. If we have more information on this burner, then
Because I now have a tremendous pleasure to introduce the MP for Herefordshire, Jessie Norman, who has agreed to chair the first panel. The first panel is Things We Can Do Now. So I hope you've all got some questions ready, and I'll hand over to Jessie.
Thank you. If I might, what I might do is start with a couple of minutes of background as to where I think we are. Because I might start from how. First of all, thank you so much, Melissa, and everyone for what a fantastic conference it is. What testimony to everyone's commitment to the here on a Sunday morning. How excellent to have a real insight into the education of some of the things that we heard about this morning. But also how useful to have farmers and concerned citizens and external experts and, as it were, all of the different kind of groups in play able to talk to you all know I've been doing the Wye for 30 years, and so I've seen things like the what else? What are the things, earlier, this is often short-term. The public energy and public concern, this is also important. There's lots of evidence, lots of property, the soil in and around Herefordshire for decades. And there is a chicken litter issue that we're currently talking about, but let's not forget that's only part of a much wider picture about embedded phosphorus. The second thing I would say is that it is structurally different compared to many of the other issues you see with river improvement for several reasons. The first is just property. You've got to work with them. You've got to work with them. The second is it's a many for one. There are lots of different particular farmers who have to be part of the long-term future by some of the group just this morning. And they have to have structures within which they can work of enforcement with attention, and the third is this is one where we still don't really have an absolute full grasp on the science. We're learning about the interactions related to those problems in the longer term as well. So it really is a difficult issue. I'm going to pipe down now, but just to say, I think what is going to be needed is, and I've said government for 2 years now, is a long-term, 5 to 10 year plan, working across the border, bringing everyone together with single, individual, designated leadership. I've got a campaign for SEAL stuff that I've been doing for as well. But until we get something like that, I don't think we're going to get the issue. There are many parts of the country where one of the standard moves has been, talk about sewage and talk about water. I see what's called a care. Thank you. But of course, in Wye, that's 20% of the problem at the moment. I'm going down as they get on top of the issue, and the rest of it remains what it is. So let's not pretend that is the issue. Let's think of it in a holistic and inclusive way. Let me shut up now and introduce our panel. We'll take your questions as well. Where should we start on what we've heard today? Yes, young man at the beginning. I won't identify you, but I know you.
Thank you, Jesse. My name is Tom Tibbett. I'm chairman of Friends of the Upper Wye. We're a very broad community group. We've set up a citizen science monitoring program, and we now have a dashboard which shows almost in real time, currently weekly update of the latest data, the state of play according to our river water policy testers who go out and voluntarily take river water samples and measure for phosphorus and nitrogen and other things. Here they are. But I'm here today really on behalf of the river and on behalf of the group to try and make sure the river gets a fair hearing. And actually, listen, I wanted to start right at the beginning with your comments. You said that you're framing today as an opportunity for farmers to get a fair hearing. And I think that it's really important for me to say, as Friends of the Upper Wye, we are not against farmers. I myself am a farmer. I'm so poor that I'm not actually a subsidised farmer because I don't have enough land. But I do make cider and I sell that value-added product to make my living. So I don't want to give the impression that Friends of the Upper Wye is demonizing farmers or is in any way against farmers. The problem we have isn't the farmers, individual operators in the landscape in their thing. The problem is the system that they're operating in. If you're part of the Avara supply chain, as we saw on the Paul White House documentary, you often don't even know what's going on off your farm. It's all done for you. Food is produced for you. Chicken is produced for you. The chicken, the baby chicks are brought to your farm a day old and put in your shed. I mean, you can literally have your eyes closed to this operation, and the bar does it for you. So the question is, well, there's several questions.
This is one at a time. What's coming around? So we'll come back to you later, but get this one in, and then we'll move on.
Fair enough. Well, I just wanted to pick up on Sarah Belton's point, then maybe to start with. She said that firstly, Avara is a significant employer in Hereford. It'd be great to have some numbers on actual jobs and stuff. Do they really employ? And the other question for you, Sarah, you said policing livestock under the movements is extremely complicated for the reason for not doing it. I would contend that policing the movement of manure, which don't have ear tags, and can't be given names according to the form, is even harder in policing the movement of livestock. So I'd like to hear your comments on that.
Brilliant, thanks, Tom. Can we actually just use that to open up a topic which I think is really important in general, enforcement? And maybe, Sarah, you can kick off, and if others want to talk about that, or indeed in the room, from a farm standpoint.
Yeah, no, I agree. They obviously are cattle have ear tags, confident. You know, that is the existing system of catchment, obviously, for a reason. However, there's no system at the moment that says catchment has this much, and we keep tabs on them. Yes, there's numbers we take them from farm, abattoir, or wherever. But there is no central system at the moment that says there are different catchment moving there, and it changes every week. That's the problem, I think. If we're looking at an example from Marksman Farm in Yorkshire, you can take those 1,000 pigs to abattoir, that was a but someone at 3 other people could bring another 1,000 in. There is no system at the moment that can manage it. We could develop one, not saying we can't have one, but there isn't the policy or the legislation to do it at the moment. I believe it is possible.
5,217 full-time equivalent employees across Savara, according to their website. John, we can look at the facts. I think we're probably available online. Let's see if another question. Everyone's got one fact. Yes, young lady.
Thank you. Catherine Mabry from Monmouth Council. Jessie, really is a challenge to you. In Wales, you mentioned the problem of the cross-border collaboration and the fact we have different governments and different processes and different regulatory bodies on both sides of the border. In Wales, we do now have quite a powerful collaborative structure developed. Indeed, we've got a summit on Thursday where the catchment partnership supported across the SATs in Wales will be able to speak with the First Minister and the Secretary of State for Climate Change. And so my challenge to you is how you are ensuring and enabling engagement across the border with that group, who I believe are trying to engage with England, but are not actually, have not until now had the response we hoped for from the now previous Secretary of State for the Environment in England. So really it's a request and a challenge to you to make sure that happens.
Thank you so much. Well, fantastic question. Of course, you were involved in the coastal of a couple of years ago, which was after 12 months of kind of focusing on managed to get everyone in the room in the 4 counties and bring in that well and bring the environment and that police. And that, I think, was set forward. What everyone tried to talk to each other, it got set the terms for what they said profit for great. But it was a very small step forward after a lot of campaigning. And what it was doing, I think, something very good to you. The first is that the Welsh at that time were somewhat behind the UK government. That's no longer the case. The Welsh appear to be ahead of the UK government on this issue. The second was, it brought out to me that the Environment Agency at that time really was not an effective entity. I'm getting further feedback on this. Because the new management now, I hope that it's starting to turn the corner for what is a very big organisation. It has a tremendous amount of things to help us across the whole border, provided it works closely as we historically did with that. That's the second. The third thing is, listen, I think we have to go. DEFRA, I'm afraid, the nicest possible way, have been wage shortages. We've got to raise property. There's a considerable amount of lobbying and pressure by me to come up in June, and many people will be in that limited time to talk to locals, to solicit the locals, and to engage more widely with councils. She wants a 3-month plan for land on September 15th of the Wye Valley Action Plan, a get anything done, and is now stepped down from office. I will be so quickly about 70 pounds to get it is a more executive minded figure at DEFRA, and my message to him then and now is that I think it's not the beginning of the kind of coordination to do. Thank you very much for your question. More questions. Sorry, yes. Sir, yeah, then we'll go to that.
Good morning, Andrew McRobb from CPRE. I've got a question for Richard. Given a following wind, how long does he think it will take before he can get a plant up and running for 28,000 tonnes of chicken litter? And I asked the question in the background that every year we do nothing, we're putting another 1,700 tonnes of phosphate into the catchment. So I think his proposal looked really encouraging, but I'd love to know what his best guess is on the time frame.
The answer is that we're going for 11,000 so we're doing 3 months. The real answer is it's going to take us 2 years to build the plant. That's 2 years from the EA, 3.5 million, just to sign an officer. Look at that people. It now takes very complicated application. They've got to sign 5 more officers. So when they'll even start looking at our food, is anyone get it? Yes, I think the planning commission through the minister's planning should be across getting the so 2 years from
Thank you, Jesse. My name is James Marsden. I chair the Climate and Nature Partnership Board. But in my past, I've been a member of my signature on designation papers for the Lower Wye Lug Sea societies to see. So I have a study of history. So we knew about the phosphate in the lug in 1995. There was a report that had commission written by Trust Environmental had to make it available to those who was very soon. My question is rather complicated. I like the big picture, former policy of that thing. I'm hearing this is a binary topic. So my question to the panel is what can be done to join up action for net zero carbon? Remember, agriculture in net terms is responsible for 22% territorial emissions in the county. What can be done to make recovery? The targets disaggregated Herefordshire in 30 by 30 international treaty obligations and environmental improvement plan, Jesse, your government environmental improvement plan, equate to 50,000 hectares of habitat protected and managed to make sure under 30 by 30, and 25,000 under the EIP target at 2022. Protected and managed to make sure in the last case created and or restored. So join that up now for what can be done now to meet these targets. That's my challenge to you. Join it up. Think about the three things together. It's not just about shit. It all comes back to shit. And let's not forget that's the conversation about life. You need life to manage those flood meadows, to manage those hay meadows, to graze the earth. We're not talking, I'm not right. Finish, Jesse. Join it up.
Lovely. Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you. Fabulous intervention. Can I just please you? I think my results really quite useful there. Right. Oh, you do? Good. Okay. Well, I'm hoping that that's an indirect, very warm endorsement of the point I'm making about the importance of the OEP, which is coming under the new Environment Act, as an enforcement mechanism, which I think could be very helpful to try to bring this kind of wider picture together. Now, who wants to pick this up? Why don't you pick up the Herefordshire Council?
That's the point. Obviously, we're all here speaking about our specific expertise today, but collectively, we absolutely are addressing these not as a binary problem. If you take, we talked about looking at the high-risk areas and not having life on the loan, perhaps, so they can be much better used for habitat or the biodiversity gain. If we are pyrolizing or developing biochar, often that is a carbon negative product, and not only is it carbon negative in its production, but it also, once it's in the ground as well, it actually suppresses the breaking out of carbon. So I think collectively we are, although we are talking about shit as well, and thank you very much, yes, together we are addressing all of this.
Would anyone else like to come in on anything?
I mean, I'd just like to have you say that we've known about phosphate since 1995. With my farmers had we had no end of rules, regulations, schemes, and none of that came through in those speeches. We would concentrate on nitrogen, NPK, we did all the various things, and the trouble is they change. Every 2 or 3 years they change. So we focus on one area, and then we've got to focus on another area. It comes back to we joined up consistent messages to get right down to the farmer level. It's fine people with a DEFRA or high government consistent message. And many of these things we've got our phosphate down in 10 years. 10 years. Let's have consistency.
Okay, that's a very well taken point. I'll have to take Tom Maddox a little bit. Hold on a second. Let's get it so people can hear the recording.
Hi, Nicola Cutcher, journalist and member of Friends of the Lower Wye. Lots of these initiatives right now are being led by industry, coming up with solutions, but I'm interested, Jesse, in where the government appetite is for regulatory change, because if we are talking about catchment budgets and nutrient flows, we desperately need enforcement of both where the manure goes, how the soil tests work, and it does seem that that's the crucial missing picture right now. All the progress has been made through private companies, but all the science says we have to reduce livestock numbers and export the manure. And it's the first bit, dealing with the pollution at source. Is there any political appetite at all to address livestock numbers?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. I think one of the things that be careful not on very along with the I don't think that's the result. You see how that very close to something. But I think the big and again, I think I'm not talking
Thank you, Jesse. Pat Sterling. I'm also from the Wye, but I'm going to talk with my, excuse me, with my steering group member of the Wye Catchment Partnership, where I represent the various citizen science groups in the room. So I wanted to just highlight a couple of things that we've skirted around here. If you look at the, and Sarah particularly, I think this question's coming to you. If you look at the numbers that Refocus have released, they've released 2 reports, 3,500 tonnes excess per year, then 1,700 tonnes excess per year at phosphate. In the interests of making sure that we are all collectively aligned, and again, why catchment view, I just want to highlight firstly that those 2 numbers, one comes from DEFRA, that's the 3,500 tonnes, one comes from Avara, based on numbers from Avara's specific operation, 1,700 tonnes. So the truth is, and we have been in consultation with Lancaster about this, the truth is somewhere between those. So I'd like to, just for the record, make sure that as a group, everyone who's thinking about this, make sure that they think there isn't a specific number here. There is a large number somewhere between those. Which brings me to that question, which is that given that, based on the numbers of the model there with the cattle in Herefordshire, which I don't think has changed huge amounts, if you took all of them out based on those numbers, every single cow out of Herefordshire, we'd still only get rid of 7 tonnes of phosphorus, which is a tiny fraction of problem. Listening to some of the numbers coming from the folks who are looking at poultry litter management, that's a much, much bigger number. Can we please get a model like you've provided here from for cattle? You get a model for other livestock as well. So we can sort of see, we can all see, where is the problem, and therefore where is the solution. I just think the numbers, if we can get the numbers, it makes the conversation so much more straightforward. So if we can get those models, and then again, from a Wye Catchment Partnership perspective, where there is a model being built to try to tackle that bigger picture, in consultation with Mott McDonald, that is going to be delivered sometime early next year, so in early January. So there is thinking about the unintended consequences and how they can knock on all of the different aspects of the catchment. So do engage with the Wye Catchment Partnership.
You don't. I've got 2 things. So one, I don't think it is so easy. We've done a lot of work on poultry numbers, and in fact, we've training through planning applications back to the year dot, lots of local information, etc. And it turned out that in Wales anyway, the numbers we came to, which may be a little were about twice the numbers that produced in the national. This is just poultry. Pigs, I don't know if anybody knows, a whole lot of pig farms being installed in Wales, hundreds of livestock sheds, even just agricultural sheds, and there has been no control of those at all. So I would just say that obviously the numbers game isn't particularly important anymore to deal with numbers, but I don't think it's an easy game. The other thing I would like to say very quickly is we've been talking about manure, but one impact of manure is the ammonia, and we haven't been talking about ammonia. And we've heard that Avara is perfectly clean from the point of view of pollution while the chickens are in the sheds. I would dispute this because ammonia is released from the sheds, and the regulations for ammonia emissions are far from perfect. That is damaging our plant biodiversity, and we go back to James's argument about growing up.
Okay, that's helpful. So one source of proof, better numbers, and thinking of what the next problem is. Years ago, but we're looking at ammonia now. Yes, that's right.
Thank you. Thank you, Elissa, for organising this and to all of you. It's been really interesting hearing it. My name's Tony Fagan. I'm a Herefordshire Councillor and I represent residents in Birchwood, which is actually part where the source of the Gamba Brook is, and the Gamba and the Darren Brook run through the ward, and they are described to me by the Environment Agency as two of the poorest quality brooks in the whole of the catchment. And from where I stand in the ward, you can see untold number of anaerobic digesters. And I think the question for me, first of all, in terms of carbon footprint, shipping chicken manure out of the county and across the country, I'm not entirely sure how that sits in terms of our net zero ambitions. Are those movements actually counted in the equation, the carbon equation? But also about the digester that comes from those anaerobic digesters. And I really appreciate what I'm hearing from the farmers that are able to invest in new technologies. But a lot of the farmers around me do not have the capital to invest in those technologies, but they have AD plants running. And I think that we're being told that the solution, anaerobic digestion, is the solution, the short-term solution to the problem. And I'm not entirely sure that I'm convinced about it. What is happening to that digester? What are the solutions for that digester? I think that it's really important to understand that.
Jenny, that's okay. Can we just rewind for a second? I've got Tom waiting on the other thing. So for the panel, just to be clear on your question, very interesting one. One is about incentives. Do these large digesters move it, as it were, the less effective smaller digesters sell their products to the larger ones or how that can work? And then I think the wider, let's stick with that for a second. I just think one
as far as the litter going out, how to goes on lorries, this is immediate from a bar to actually make a serious statement that they are wanting to make it. So it is not sustainable what they are doing, but it is a very short-term fix.
So this is wet litter.
This is wet litter, straight out the houses. So this is a short-term fix, and I'm hoping it's going to be 6 to 12 months before we see this awful, I spoke about earlier, being brought out and actually being shown to work. So that will make that work. That will make a huge difference. But from a virus point of view, this is to show that they want to make a difference. It's not sustainable, but it is your right. Short term. And what Richard's doing with this digester, this is game changing. The technology he is bringing in is game changing for digesters. And the other thing, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware of, is a big digester potentially with planning to Wittick. Again, he's looking at similar technology to Richard to strip that phosphate out. So digesters, I know what you're saying at the moment. The farmer within your group has to prove to the EA that he can use that digester legit. Within his thrown on it. Okay, but as far as I'm aware, and I don't use digesters, but as far as I'm aware, the farmers who have digesters have to be able to show that they can use that digester legit. So,
Yeah, we've questions about sprouting like mushrooms. But can I just ask a very quick question? Which is, when you've got your platform up and running, what is the incentive or requirement for people to use it? Because as I can see at the moment, it feels like it's voluntary at the moment.
From the virus point of view, they are very strict.
Right, so it's essentially.
They will no longer be.
Okay, that's great. Back to the very patiently waiting. Yes, sir.
Just a question.
Can you say you are? Sorry.
Yeah, Chris Gilbert, we farm my side Ledbury. I'm interested. We've tried to reduce the amount of bag fertilizer that we're putting on our farm by importing chicken muck and FYM. If that is taken away from us, I'd like to know what we're supposed to be putting back onto the ground, apart from buying bag nitrogen that comes from Egypt, wherever, around the world. But so that increases our reliance on oil and transport on the roadway. So I'm sort of curious, we're trying to be more sustainable by using the fertilizer, but also using chicken muck, which we're putting on via GPS and using our soil nutrient plants that we've been doing it for 12 years now, so we know what we're doing on this. But I'm curious, if we get rid of livestock, we get rid of the whole cycle, we get rid of everything. So I'm just curious with what we're supposed to be replacing it with in the short and medium term.
I mean, it's almost one for you. I mean, I don't know whether there's a kind of regulatory view locally or Patrick.
I will, Bruce. I hear what you're saying. Mark was a very good customer of ours.
I've got no axe to grind here.
But as a business, we have pledged to Avara, we will not pay to import any liquor and to sell any group and trade. So we are standing our ground on that. And as I said earlier, it's everything from Avara's point of view. Let's just take a stand and show to their customers they are serious. So I'm hoping, Bruce, 6 to 12 months, we will be able to start.
That's a Herefordshire source.
Thanks, Jesse. Chris Eco from Regenerate Outcomes. We're a regenerative farming organisation. We provide learning and mentoring for farm groups who move to regenerative farming. I think we're getting down to what I see as another problem, which is how do we minimise the nutrients that we spread on our farms, and how do we make sure that we're not overspreading nutrients wherever they come from? So I'd be keen to hear from the panel as to how they think farms can move forwards, minimising the nutrients, therefore minimising the runoff, and maximising whole inputs.
Huge issue. James, I think. Thank you very much, James, for your view.
Yeah, thank you. I would say we switched to precision soil mapping 8 years ago, and we are something on an acre from our fleet that has some of the hours as well. I think that can go further. I think technology is moving on a long way, so we're looking, particularly on our high value horticulture, we're almost we're looking at going down to smaller areas and really drill down into precision so that the application kit is out there to really put stuff only where it's needed and not where it's not. Combined with recycling and things like that.
Okay, so there are lots of people who are small farmers. So I'm seriously.
The development of biochar and ventures of that are so once it's disposable, these processes are then locked up within the biochar. You can still biodegradable. And in addition to that, you're actually nice of the building properties basically of that biochar. I know there's lots of work in areas at the moment, but potentially you'll be applying that, you'll be staying within the group, and that's there. I
I'm Cherry Taylor, and I'm involved in East Monmouth, and I also am a market gardener, a no-dig market gardener. So I'm really, really pleased to hear somebody finally mention regen ag, and I'm very interested in this area, and I'm trying to find out a lot about it. I'm just reading Gabe Brown's book called Dirt to Soil, and everybody should read it because it's incredibly enlightening. And in this book, he explains, and nobody has mentioned soil biology yet, that the soil biology is absolutely key for generating good soil structure, chocolate cake type soil, and that addresses Sarah's pathways, because if you get good soil structure, you end up with good infiltration. It means you don't have the runoff that we have. And the reduced runoff would mean less stuff goes into the river. So in the book, he also explains that by adding fertilizer and other inputs to the soil, you reduce the plant's need to interact with that soil biology. The exchanges don't happen, the soil biology starts to perish, the soil structure diminishes, and you end up pretty much like, and again, forgive me, a lot of soils, I imagine, in our country and around the world. So what I've heard this morning is very much all about band-aid solutions to a problem that we have. And I would say to the panel, where do they think regen ag fits in to this problem, and what are they doing to promote it?
Okay, fabulous question. Thank you. So who wants to go first? Okay, let's go Alyssa. Go.
First part of the day panel was specifically short-term measures. If you look at the itinerary, and the afternoon panel is about long-term measures, and we're going into more detail around soil, including regenerative farming.
Brilliant. Okay, do you want to say 4 seconds, James? 4
seconds. Very, very quickly, the lady asked about ammonia in sheds. We're having looked at some planning things recently for our litter burners. We're working, planning is actually currently working on old standard figures going back to a very long time when we had direct heating in the sheds. The litter was a lot better. The quality of boiler shed management, I would say, probably improved a lot since then. The short answer is we don't actually know how much ammonia is made. The new sheds all have ammonia stuff. I think they're on the new builds, so really. So I think
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, one of my questions. 3 minutes, but I promise
Thank you, Jesse. I want to think sustainably and holistically about the whole problem, and something we haven't mentioned today, something that John Reed told me. He told me that 20% of the chicken feed that is given to Barra's chickens comes from South America. It's coming from the forest of Cerrado, it's the Cargill, massive Cargill industrial GMO soy operations over there. My biggest fear is that all these wonderful short-term technical solutions, which will prevent phosphorus going to the river, which is a good thing, will have one very awful side effect, which will bake in with the VARA non-circular, ultimately unsustainable model of importing deforested lungs in order to feed these chickens. I suppose I want to kind of go back to James Marsden's point, which is the problem, which includes net zero and biodiversity, and then tackle the problem with that.
Since that's far, I would like to suggest, we really do need a proper VARA. No, I agree. We should actually collectively work on it. And also, I have to say, let's wind it up now. We'll run over a little bit. The questions and answers. Sorry.
and range runoff is exacerbated by the position, the proximity to a watercourse, and we're dealing with the hangover of poor planning decisions which seemed intent on tucking the sheds out of sight from the general public, which inevitably led to them being tucked down the bottom of a bank just above a watercourse, and that makes it very difficult to deal with the runoff, whether that's we've got a challenge which relates to the consistency of the manure and the frequency with which it's being taken out of the shed. So in many of the modern sheds, they have multi-tier systems, and the muck is removed every 4 days. So it's very difficult to plan export. What we really need for every single free-range egg site in the catchment is a muck store, and not everybody has one. But to be able to manage the application of manures as fertilisers, or potentially the export of manures outside of the catchment to reduce the nutrient accumulation in the catchment, are manure stores. And that's something that we are working on. We're trying to support farmers to get the grants through Welsh Government or from DEFRA to be able to build secure storage. But it's something I feel like we need more of. They need more grant support. These are unaffordable for a lot of farms. We also need more, farmers need more support with nutrient management. There's a really big difference between production on the Welsh side of the catchment and on the English side of the catchment, and you'll all be familiar, I expect, with the fact that we've got farming rules for water in England, which regulates the supply of fertilisers and requires farmers to apply them according to crop demand. And in Wales, we only have the agri-pollution regs, which are basically the same as the nitrate vulnerable zone regulations, which only regulate nitrogen. And farmers at the moment in Wales are really struggling with the requirements of these new regulations, all of the record keeping that goes along with it. It's for livestock farmers, it won't have been something that they've ever had to do before, but it doesn't address phosphorus, phosphate application. And to be able to understand the issues, manage their nutrients, do the whole farm nutrient planning, which is really necessary, they need support and help to get there. What we are working on and making good progress with, probably not fast enough, is the industry collaboration, which is necessary to be able to understand the volume of nutrients, as Avara are able to do with their fairly sort of closed supply chain, the volume of nutrients, the opportunities for managing it and exporting it and managing that whole catchment quantity, volume and accumulation of manure and nutrients. What we really need to aspire to have is more farm level innovation investment so that farmers can dry the manure that they've got coming out of the sheds to make it more easy to transport, because one of the issues that we have with free range or laying sheds as opposed to broiler sheds is that the manure is very wet. So it's difficult to transport. There are also sorts of biosecurity risks. Avian influenza is the big concern that relates to transporting this stuff around or bringing it to central hubs for processing. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. We finally had some buy-in from the British Egg Industry Council, who manage the Lion Code standards or own and operate the Lion Code standards, and they are representing lots of small-scale egg packing companies that purchase from the catchment, and they're looking to start to come into the conversation and talk about how we can work together better. So that feels like important progress. When it comes to range runoff risk, as I was saying, the level of risk really depends on the proximity to a watercourse. So if for anyone that has kept chickens will know that they're incredibly destructive. It's very difficult to keep the grass growing underneath their feet. You will often have bare range areas in front of the pop holes, in front of the area closest to the sheds. That's not necessarily a risk if that runoff, overland runoff, can't get to a watercourse. It may look a bit rubbish. It's not great for public perception. It's not particularly great for the farmer or for the hens, but not necessarily a risk to watercourse, to water health. But it is still really important to have good proactive range management, because what we're trying to do with that is to draw the birds away from those very concentrated areas immediately around the house where the nutrients build, and then there's a risk not just of overland runoff but also of nutrients leaching into any drainage that is close to the house or into the groundwater. And we know that that's a risk, particularly in that sort of 20 metres closest to the house. So we're looking to farmers to use tree planting schemes to draw the birds out, to experiment with interesting crops that will attract the birds away from the house. And we've had some great farmers to work with that have been trialling different approaches, and I'm just going to show you a few examples. Bottom right picture is a farmer who had he's got a very steep range and it was very bare when I went to see him, and he's done a reseed with a very high seed rate and a bespoke grass seed mix, but he's also tried vetiver grass buffer strip, which you probably never heard of, but it's a very deep rooting tropical plant, and he's tried miscanthus, and these are all attempts to draw the birds away from the shed and to stop the soil running off down the bank. And he's also gone to great expense putting in intermediary fences around the shed so that he can manage the grazing and rotate the birds. In the bottom left, that was a farmer that's moving fences around the perimeter, around the outside of his sheds to manage the rotational grazing and give the birds access to a new area every six weeks. And that is all helping to draw the birds out and reduce the nutrient build-up in the area next to the shed. Top left is somebody who's planted thousands and thousands of trees, 2,400 per hectare on a massive range area. So those birds in a few years' time will be ranging through a forest, which will be amazing for them and amazing for the environment. This is really this was an excuse really to talk about wetlands, because this risk is it's kind of the same as what we were talking about before. It's the fact that the nutrients are building up in the range area, and in some cases and on some sites there is drainage in that range area, and we've got to try and make sure that drainage is intercepted before it goes to a watercourse. So one of the ways of mitigating that is to continue to manage the range proactively and draw the birds away from those areas that have drainage close to the shed. But in some cases we have the opportunity to put in a wetland to intercept the drainage, to mop up the nutrients, to trap the sediment, and that comes with all sorts of other additional benefits for the environment, for biodiversity and habitat. And we've had some really lovely trials. Well, the one in this picture was a trial that we put in 2022 and have been monitoring for a year and have had really positive, promising results. So we've had more than 50% reduction in phosphorus and more than 60% reduction in ammonia and nitrogen. And since then, off the back of that success, we've we have managed to install another 2 or 3, nearly 3 sites. Sorry, have I been happening on for ages? So looking to the future, these are the things that need to line up to be able to get the progress that we need. We need more egg packing companies, along with British Egg Industry Council, to collaborate to address the big issues. We need advice and guidance for farmers. We need grant support that works for farmers so that they can invest in their infrastructure. And ultimately, we need farmers paid a good price to deliver the best environmental practice. And we need that to be embedded in assurance schemes so that it's not down to mugs like me to go around and try and convince farmers to do the right thing. Thank you. I'm sorry I went on for too long.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here today to talk about some of the work that Herefordshire has been undertaking, and also I want to say a few things towards the end of my presentation about where we go next. What I want to do, though, first of all, is highlight impact beyond the river. A colleague of mine who is here this morning, out of the blue in 2019, received a letter from Natural England asking us to take legal advice, and as a result of that, the pink area of the county ended up in housing moratorium. 2019, and we're only just beginning to come out the other side of that. The impact of that on the county was catastrophic. 2,000 homes immediately put onto a waiting list because there was no mitigation. 484 of those, in case you're thinking they're a nice, well-known local developer who uses sustainable materials, 484 of those were actually affordable homes. A huge backlog of unsubmitted planning applications sits in there, and our building supply chain saying we can't work in the county anymore. We're having to go elsewhere for work. So a longer term impact beyond the initial fallout. What that meant was £300 million has been lost to the local economy. In a poor part of rural Herefordshire, that is a colossal sum. We found that businesses started to move away because of concerns about the opportunities for inward investment, if there weren't houses there for growth. And this is a part of the economy where there is what's a horrible economic term from our economic people, gross value added. That means that they don't add a lot of productivity. But, huge impacts in a low wage economy. What that meant for the council was we have to meet our housing targets. We couldn't. Significant resource pulled off of actually delivering services to actually respond to this. We lost new homes bonus. Our council tax receipts are now £1 million a year lower than they would have otherwise have been. Now, if you think of that, most of that would actually be discretionary spend. You don't build a new library because you've got 10 new homes. You don't build a new school because you've got 5 new homes. So a lot of that would have been discretionary. So significant impact on the council. If we look at the impact of housing, I think when we come back to look at this in a more reflective way in a decade's time, this will be seen as a national scandal of how on earth did we get here, where we've got 1,700 tonnes, 17 million kilograms of excess phosphate going into the river, a local plan that says we need to build 4,400 homes at a typical 0.2 kilograms per year of phosphate. We're talking about 0.023% of total impact has led to that £300 million worth of damage. Now, nobody wants to add pollution to the river. In one way, it was the right thing to do, but for me, the failure to address in other areas what was going on has had a disproportionate effect on housing. Where next? Well, we have been delivering wetlands. We've delivered our first one at Luston. That has got homes going again. I'll show you a little video in a minute of how that works. We have a bid into Department of Local of Homes and Communities. I'm dyslexic, so I always get the mnemonics mixed up. But we have a bid in. We're hoping to hear news of that before Christmas that will allow further wetlands. We're hoping against hope that that there's positive news there to get us in a position where we can buy further sites or a further site, and we will build out wetlands according to need to actually provide a way out for housing. And I think that we can get us to a point where not only we can clear the backlog, but also we can actually bank sufficient sites to begin to deal with long-term need. The other things that we're looking at, we've got some really good cooperation with our schools who are willing to say, yeah, I'll have my dirty old septic tank removed. We'll have a modern package treatment plant put in place. Some of that will be used to make the river better, and some of that will be used to sell offset to developers. And I think the really exciting proposition, and we had some research undertaken at the back end of last year, is that there is a further opportunity around what are called coppiced riparian buffers. We would suggest that developers pay to have the buffers initially put in along riverbanks. They then set up the kind of barriers that Bridie was talking around with her chickens along the riverbanks, and the actual wood stock then becomes a source of income for their maintenance. So we're looking at things like that as sort of the next where we go with mitigation. And that begins to start to stack the kinds of benefits together where you get a better river canopy, you get the protection of the river, you get and the river canopy actually lowers the water temperature, so you get benefits in terms of beginning to mitigate some of the impacts of climate change. What that would need is you can't just stick them in anywhere. We would actually need, I think the Environment Agency would have the regulation to do this, is we need riparian buffers and we need them to be X width and we need them to be in those strategic locations. I think that that would be one of the next stages we could look at in beginning to bring river recovery together with the whole scandal that has happened to the house building sector. So it's a little bit about what the council's doing on mitigation, and you'll see more on the video in a second. But where next? Herefordshire Council has been calling for some months now for a cross-border task force. And why we say that is you've heard of a lot of initiatives this morning. You've heard of a lot of proposed initiatives in the room as well. And then we've heard for a call for a single voice of truth, because truth is very much a contested space. I can hear some of the reactions behind me to various things that have been said. You can. You can, because you know it's the way you develop evidence and the way that you use that evidence. There is a need to bring that together, and there are significant cross-border challenges. So there is a need for a senior political cross-border task force. What we have been calling for some time now is a systematic approach to developing a proper plan for the Wye. The Cabinet Commission produced a very, very early, I would say, on reflection, premature report that probably needed, with reflection, 6 months further work at least before it was at a point where we could actually engage properly. And I hold my hand up, that was something that we got wrong in terms of my advice to the Cabinet Commission on that. But it still remains that Herefordshire Council is the only organisation in the world that has ever delivered a phosphate offsetting wetland and sold it to developers. Nobody else has achieved that yet, and we've actually put the start of a planning process on the table for discussion. Whether that leads to a trading scheme or not a trading scheme, I don't particularly care. What I do care about is that we actually get a proper process in place to actually start to move through all of these issues sequentially. And I don't think that that necessarily is expensive. I think for somewhere between £500,000, £1 million per year for a couple of years, So we're not talking about a huge amount of money. You could stand up a team that would actually support a cross-border task force and the Nutrient Management Board to run through a proper systematic approach. At the moment, the Nutrient Management Board is a voluntary partnership of organisations working in a voluntary way. There is no single person leading. People lead processes, and at the moment we have an unled process that doesn't bring a plan together. We have an evidence group that has not met, is not resourced, and actually we've had people calling for different pieces of evidence today. Very regularly there are pieces of evidence dropping across my desk, but nowhere to refer it to actually begin to refer this together. It doesn't matter necessarily. Okay. It doesn't matter necessarily who leads it, but we do need that process putting in place. The final point that I want to say is that the Cabinet Commission hasn't gone away. It has met twice informally. It will continue to monitor what is going on around the Nutrient Management Board. It's setting some benchmarks against which progress will be measured. If it is not satisfied in 6 months, a year's time, that progress is being made, then it will meet and it will convene a formal scrutiny process. And this is where it comes together with the point that Jessie Norman was making around the Office of Environmental Protection and actually bringing together the whole catalogue of history of failed initiatives, of well-intentioned initiatives, of disparate things happening, but not an effective outcome for the river. So I just wanted to lay that on the table. I thought you wanted me to go on a few more minutes because of the regulation of people not turning up. I'm so sorry, Alyssa.
That's in the next session, not in this one.
Okay. I will hand over at that. Oh, no, we've got the video, sorry. Yeah. Yes.
The River Wye Special Area of Conservation is an internationally recognised site. However, high levels of nutrients are causing concerns around water quality. High levels of phosphates can affect the delicate ecological balance of the watercourse. The site at Luston tackles point source pollution, helping to restore the condition of the river and unlock development-enabling growth in the north of the county. Each cell was lined with clay from the site and rolled to create an impermeable layer. Each cell has a mixture of specially selected native wetland species. In total, 85,210 plant plugs were sewn into the clay liner. Each cell took 1 week to plant by hand. Wetlands offer a variety of ecosystem benefits. Known as the Earth's kidneys, they are able to remove a variety of pollutants. As the water pipe from the Welsh water site enters and flows through the cells 1, 2, then 3, phosphorus is removed. The water is then released back to the local watercourse with a lower phosphate level than if it had just been discharged to the brook. Weekly samples are taken as water enters and exits the wetland. Herefordshire Council will continue to manage the wetlands, providing ongoing maintenance, monitoring and research around the benefits of nature-based solutions. This project is the first of its kind and is already trading credits. Creating the Luston Wetlands Herefordshire Council. In association with Bentley, the Wye and Usk Foundation and Welsh Water, part funded by the Marches Local Enterprise Partnership. For more information, please visit herefordshire.gov.uk.
Right, I'm not sure how to follow that because I got a video and it's not half as good as that. Right, firstly, before I start really, it's important to understand that it's not just about my farm, it's about every farm. We've got probably about 2,500 in the county, so this long-term solutions won't necessarily stick to every farm, and every situation is almost unique. I've got 10 minutes to talk, so there's so much to talk about, so we can talk later if there's anything else that I miss. You've had an introduction. We're looking here towards Webley, so this is the area where we were talking about just now. I was going to get a laser pointer, but I don't know how to do that with all these 4 screens. That's Webley in the kind of foreground. Right at the very top of the picture you'll see the River Wye. It's the closest I could get to a picture of my farm and the River Wye, where it comes through Winferton and then down to Redwood Iron. You've had an introduction about the farm. All I'll say is at the moment it's sort of transitioning a bit, but traditionally we've grown apples, poultry and arable, but now you can see we're sort of mix it in together a bit with an agroforestry system. But that's not for everyone, but you know, we can talk about that another time. I don't own all that land, so it's just a bit within the red that is the farm. We're going to start right at the very top, which is the western end, and then I'll give you a little bit of a tour around. All the water, even though the River Wye is at the top of the picture, everything flows to the east, and the water takes about a course of 55 kilometres before it joins the River Wye. So it's quite hard for me to really get my head around how I affect the River Wye, but we'll get there. Right, top corner there, that's the Webley sewage treatment plant, and that's my field. So my first field is next to the Newbridge Brook. You'll just see there's a little bit of an arc there, on there. And I think there's probably about 24 sewage plants in Herefordshire, but there's about 2,500 farms. So already we've got a slight disparity in how we manage that. And I think it's important we think about it in terms of that field there. I'm missing my pointy bit now. That the crop, it's really who consumes the crop and what part they have in this story. And so that could be any consumer within the UK. It could be competing with the Americans. They might buy it on price, so subsidised American, Brazilian crops. It could be people buy it because of the environment. People buy it because they like the sound of it, being British. But basically, we're on a global market. Now, Councillor Swindlehurst wanted us to talk about the challenges, and these are a few of the challenges that we face as farmers. Whereas the treatment plant, that's basically there for everyone in Webley that flushes a toilet or runs water down there. Our crop, obviously, we've got challenges with politics. Where is he? He's still here. Wake up, yeah. Politicians, bureaucracy, volatility in cost, volatility in weather, volatility in selling price. Whereas the sewage plant is kind of a regional privatised monopoly. I mean, I got quite used to dealing with shit from Webley, but this is a different kind of shit that comes out. Basically, that you don't have a choice. You have to supply through that, and if they can leverage Ofwat to actually help them with the cost of doing work on that, and they have invested a lot of money in this plant, then that's sort of easier to go through. So our biggest challenge is cheap food and who's acting as our Ofwat. You know, what I mean to say is biosecurity, sorry, not biosecurity, security of food in this country and environmental benefit. How do we put those together? I think that came up earlier with a question that Jesse answered. So, going back to 2007, I'm not quite in 1985, which the gentleman said earlier, but we started seeing a little bit of a tweak upwards on our phosphorus levels on soil analyses. So I got myself into a bit of a rabbit hole with this and started looking at it. But what we've learnt over the years is that phosphorus is a really, this is a good way to explain nutrients in general, but it's really difficult to manage. It's the easy fixes that will happen and are more realistic and they don't cost you the money. So here's a very, very simple thing. We used to go along to our big customers, They used to talk about the area under trees being a sterile strip, and I spent my life in paranoia that some professional was going to come on my farm and ask me, why am I trying to grow trees in a sterile strip? So I bought a mower, which has got a side flinger on it, and flings the cuttings under the trees, and now I've got a bit of a sort of armour almost for the soil, and that's worked very well. So we've got to look for those sort of solutions, and it sort of carried on. This is really more of a prevention that we've got, so this is very general, and we've only got 10 minutes, so I'm not going to be able to dwell on this, but speak to the regen farmer guy at the back or anyone else like that. Took ages really to get my head around that when we started doing sap analysis, we've done a load of soil analysis, but I went over to Holland in 2015, and the sap analysis told me that our plants weren't actually getting phosphorus, even though there was surplus in the soils and whatever. And so then we started having to work out why and how. So we diagnosed the problem, but then we had to deprive using poultry litter. It seemed the obvious thing to do, you know, good source of nitrogen, whatever. But we had to give the soil a rest and give it a chance to start working. And it's very difficult if you're in a commercial operation to do this, because it's not cold turkey quite, but you know, there's a lot at stake. And we had to let it recover. So I stopped using a lot of granular fertiliser, we call them, which you spread onto the land. Started using more sort of foliar fertilisers, you probably call it, more targeted. And it's sort of working, but we're still learning, we're still going there. We made huge numbers of mistakes, and you know, everyone sort of wonders what the hell you're up to sometimes. But you know, it's an interesting thing. But yeah, there's something in it, but we've not quite got all the answers yet. And I've tried to this doesn't exist, this word, extensify the business, but sort of mixing apple trees and fruit with cereals, that type of thing. Right, other long-term solutions. So those are the prevention solutions. There are a few things we can look to do. There's no silver bullet, but I've shown you the outline of our farm there. And if we understand the watercourse a bit, this is the Newbridge Brook, which flows towards almost towards to the east. Like I say, at 55 kilometres it will arrive at the Wye. This is the Gabbridge Brook. And then through Webley, if you look there, there's a few smaller watercourses. Right, now, I think we're going to talk about the filters next. Yeah, that's the farm thing, yeah. So this is my epoxy video of the filter, sorry. A couple of things. The reason for showing this is that it doesn't work, so that's how good it is. Yeah, okay. Right, yeah. It's loading.
It was coming. Patience.
Give me a chance for a rest. I've only got 10 minutes. Yeah.
I won't count that.
Yeah. So it's important, basically, to understand these things don't come cheap. There's a lot of work involved in it, so that's the first thing. The second thing is you'll see in a minute the volunteers from the Wye Foundation coming in and doing the work. Took them a week at the council, this lot. Look at them. Bloody hell. You know, if I could clone that. Brilliant.
That's a work rate.
Right, complex picture. I wanted a laser on this. Middle left side. What we have under our soil is pipes, 100 mil, 150 mil pipes. Thank you. And they have holes in them, so the water drains from the soil. They're about a metre and a half deep, or no, perhaps a metre deep, and then drains the soil. And the drains go into ditches or streams. So top left-hand corner or middle left-hand, there's a drain, and the filter is halfway down the left margin there. That's where the wetland filter is that we've built, that you've just seen filmed in conjunction with the Wye Foundation. So that takes everything south of the Gabbridge Road, which is the line. You can almost see it from that, on my farm. Then if I look at the other main drain trellises, you call them, the one towards the top is quite interesting because that actually drains 2 housing estates with their overflow stormwater, then one of my fields, then it goes across the estate fields. I'm glad James Verding's here because, I help him out because then it goes into my field again and I get the blame for everything before it joins the Newbridge Brook. And then on the very bottom trellis you'll see there's some more trellis work. It goes across the estate's land, a couple of fields, and back to mine before it joins the Newbridge Brook. So there we have one already in place, and we've got 2 potential additional filters where we might be able to do some good. Now, the idea with the filters is that that is your insurance policy. It's there just in case you need it to be there. It's not there necessarily because you're already polluting it, but it's belt and braces approach. And then finally, there's a couple of other things we've been doing. So we don't burn litter, but on the far left side, you see we've got 2 buckets into 1 bale. We've been baling poultry manure. And it's not just a case of baling it, it's actually adding some facultative bacteria to it. That's not me with stutter, that's what it's called. It's the closest you get to bokashi. And so effectively, you're adding the goodness in there and you're coming out with a bit of a soil improver. It's a sealed unit, there's no contamination risk, it's easily transportable, and basically you don't volatilise, you lose the nutrition as a gas. You know, everyone's talked at school at solid liquid gas. That's really one way that we've devised to overcome that. It's a very expensive piece of kit, but not quite yet 11-year payback, I hope, on that. But you know, it's just another approach that you could take. And on the right-hand side, if ever I do use poultry litter, which I do now in certain fields, it's important to try and balance it with some carbon source. So we've done composting. I don't like doing it too much because it's very expensive to do, and yeah. But yeah, that's what we're doing there. So if you've got questions, I think we've got a session later, and. No, there's all that social media stuff that you can look at YouTube. I've got loads of videos of baling. I've got a dirty video of chicken muck being baled in there and stuff like that. So, thank you very much.
Okay, so we have a decision to make, Room. We can either go to lunch now, because we were going to have Kate and Martin speak and then go to lunch, but we're slightly run over. So we could go to lunch now and then come back in here.
Is it salad?
I think there may be a sandwich or something if you're lucky, and then come back and let Kate and Martin do their bit, and then have the panel. So how does everyone feel about that, Tom? We'll do that after the second set of speakers, in the second panel. Okay, so we have 2 more speakers, then lunch, and then come back for the panel, which was the original itinerary. Okay, if that's the yeah, like the morning. We had 2 sets of speakers and then the panel. We'll be the same here, 2 sets of speakers and then the panel. If we all want to just hold on and do and wait for lunch, then I'm happy to do that. Yeah. Okay. Right. Sorry. So next speakers are Kate Speak-Adams and Martin Williams. Okay. So well, whatever. So Martin, who's one of the chairman of Farm Herefordshire, runs Tump Farm in Fownhope. It's a mixed farming enterprise of grassland and cereals and a contracting business. He's vice country chair of the NFU Herefordshire and joint chair of Farm Herefordshire Partnership, which is taking a lead on agriculture action in the Wye. Martin.
Wow. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for putting by your lunch. I'm sure there's a guy out there eating sandwiches or putting them in the microwave if he needs to. Will the person in the room who is going to solve the river issues please stand up? Anybody? Did you not hear at the back? Can the person in the room please stand up? Exactly. There isn't one person that is going to solve all the issues that we've got around the river and the water quality that we need to get to an end of. So that's where collaboration comes into it. It is not one person's job, it is everybody's job.
Yeah.
Working, as I have done with Kate in Farm Herefordshire. Farm Herefordshire is a place that is not a talking shop. There are lots of talking shops. We don't need any more of those. This place is where things actually get done on the ground. It is important to realise the members of that group, they cross advisory, regulatory and agriculture. So we're talking about agriculture as a basis. We're not talking about Rachel's wetlands and bits of housing. We're not talking about Mary's problems with her housing. We're talking about agricultural issues. What's the purpose of Farm Herefordshire? Is to collaborate, to increase impact. We need to know who's doing what on the ground and where, and make sure they're directed in the right areas. We also need to provide consistent advice and guidance. During the year, there have been 21 events to November, run by Farm Herefordshire, knowledge transfer events, and giving advice and guidance to farm businesses. During the year, up until June, I believe. There are 820 businesses in Herefordshire gaining business advice through this style of work, through one business or another, whether it be YUSC, whether it be EA, whether it be DEFRA, whether it be Wildlife Trust, whoever it might be, 820 businesses were taking business advice. We are dealing with quite a widespread issue. We've already heard just now there are 2,000 farms-ish in Herefordshire. So how do we get to all those farms? What's the biggest part of the word agriculture? It's culture. And the culture of agriculture over the last 50, 60 years has been based on common agricultural policy and production of food. There is nothing at all wrong with that culture. Now we're asking for something different. And Tom's shaking his head, and you can shake his head all he's like. The common agricultural policy has driven and created a successful agricultural business in Herefordshire. It is one of the most diverse agricultural units in the country. It is a collaborative effort to retrain, to adjust to what needs to happen going forward if we are to get to a point that we need to. Farm Herefordshire works off some data. There was no data for agriculture particularly. Everyone was throwing data around. And I'm not keen on numbers. I don't care about the numbers. Is agriculture doing the best it can do? And Tom, you can frown all you like. Is agriculture doing its best? I don't think so. So the numbers are relatively irrelevant. When you come to Refocus, 2 years ago, it was said in Refocus that there were 3,000 tonnes of phosphate too much. Recently, after a revision, it's saying 1,700. Does that mean agriculture is 50% better? I don't know. Does it matter? Are we doing the best that we can? Maybe not. It's a collaborative journey that we need to take. So Farm Herefordshire, what can we do? How can we do things? We put out a survey back in April, and yes, you can pick holes in this all you like, because it is a representative survey, not a comprehensive survey. Some of this will come out into the public forum next week. We wanted to find out what changes were willing to be made by agriculture, what changes were already being made, and what were the barriers to change within agriculture. So, out of 251 respondents, yes, that's not many, is it? So yes, let's pick holes in it all you like. But we've done what we can for now. It's 13% of the county's businesses, but it's 43,000 hectares of the county, and so therefore it sounds a bit better. But pick holes in it. Please pick holes in it. We can only do what we can do. The responses came from all sorts and all sectors. So next week you will find in your social media these slides. Pick holes in them. We've gone through them to try and sense check them, because what we feel is that this is a way of engaging with those and creating that culture change by a drip feed using water, hopefully clean. So these will be going out on social media over the next week or so in a campaign to try to encourage more of those 82% or whatever it was that haven't engaged yet to start thinking about it. And it is happening, but it is definitely not one person's job to do it. It is a collaborative effort. I'll click through these quite quickly because I'm hungry too, and as a big chap I eat a lot. 90% of those group felt it was important that agriculture reduces its contribution. That's a hell of a headline, isn't it? But yes, Tom's going to say it's 90% of only 251, but it's still quite a few. Okay? So I'm not going to dwell on these, but read them, look for them. If you want them to share on your social media, come and help yourselves. We can give you a slide deck if you wish. They're all quite interesting stats. They've all been sense checked, and they'll all be on your social medias. But this job is not about any one person or one industry. Thank you.
afternoon, everyone. I am very aware that I am the only thing standing between you and your lunch. Hopefully what you've heard from Martin reiterates that there is lots of collaboration taking place in the county, and I'm just going to try and cover some of the work of the Herefordshire Agri Group that's been referred to a couple of times already this morning. And we facilitate that group at the Rural Hub, and it's got 30 members in at the moment, and it's open to any other farm businesses that would like to join it. You've seen snippets of farms and the work that's happening in the county. Alyssa and various people said to me who could present at something like this. So I'm just going to try and emphasise that you've seen 5 or 6 individuals, and there are lots more in the county in this group and lots more out of that group who are also doing a lot of work to try and improve their impact on water quality. So the group formed officially this year, but has been meeting informally for quite a number of years, convened by Martin and myself, and it's really trying to look at sort of 4 key areas that we can try and improve. Those group members are undertaking whole farm phosphate balances to try and understand how much nutrient they bring in, not just in the form of bagged fertiliser, but quantifying anything that's coming in livestock feed, in detergents, in all sorts of different ways that we can bring nutrient onto a farm business. And then quantifying how much we export, whether that's in a raw product, as meat, as dairy, or as cropped produce that's being exported, to try and give people a better understanding of their overall balance, because it's really easy to get lost and think, why aren't my nutrient levels running down? Well, sometimes this calculation can really try and bring clarity to that. So I've included a real range of examples from some of our group members to just try and reiterate how much of a phosphate balance there may be between some of those businesses, ranging from mining 40,000 kilograms of phosphorus a year by exporting a certain amount of produce without bringing in any other nutrients, to other businesses that may be 25 to 30,000 kilograms of nutrient in excess. So they're able to then look at those figures and go, crikey, no wonder our P indices aren't running down. What actions can we take? And we discuss these results as a group to try and see opportunities to reduce that level and bring ourselves hopefully down somewhere in the middle. This is an approach that was used in Northern Ireland, so it's not new by any means. I've included the kilograms per hectare figure as well, because sometimes the scary figure of 40,000 or 30,000 isn't quite as scary when you understand that that might be a very large farm, so actually spread across a larger area. If that was an excess on a very small holding, you'd have a really high nutrient load. The group members are also given one of the HANA P testing kits so that they can go and undertake some monitoring of their land drains or test water coming onto their land or going off their land, just to really try and get that engagement and improve our understanding of what impact our businesses may be having on water quality. Because I can say I don't think I'm having any impact, but until I've actually done that test and seen my water turn blue, it's hard for me to understand that clear water may still have a nutrient load. So that's been a really important process. 5 of the group members within the Agri Group have also done some of the more detailed water testing with the Wye and Usker Foundation at the beginning of this year, and are looking to do more of that to try and test all of the different forms of P, not just the HANA P that was tested in kits, because we understand that there are multiple forms and agriculture is losing perhaps more of one than the other, and we're only checking for one form at the moment. So they are really engaging in that topic. A lot of them are also adding total phosphate to their soil testing programme. We've really only looked at one form of P within our soil monitoring normally. That's what we use for agronomic programmes and nutrient management planning. But we understand from the Refocus and Lancaster work that there is this other big reserve of nutrient, and as farmers we need to try and capitalise on that, and certainly we need to understand how much is in our soil that we could be accessing. They've also been obviously discussing this approach with their agronomists. This is about culture. There's a whole raft of knowledge transfer that has to take place for us who've been taught very firmly that phosphate is always attached to the soil particle and we only need to test for one form, to go, oh, actually, well, it may be also be lost in solution, and maybe there are other forms that we could access, so we need to do a lot of work with our advisors as well. 3 of the group members are working with Lancaster at the moment to do some more detailed analysis of the different depths of nutrient moving through the soil profile, and Lancaster are keen to try and get more of the group involved in that project if they can get funding to extend it next year. The group at its core is 30 members at the moment, growing slowly, but each of those group members is also acting as an advocate within their own little tributary. So you've heard about Stephen's tributary, Martin's tributary is slightly larger on the Wye, but they're trying to host group meetings on their farms to engage neighbours and peers. Sally, who's here today, hosted a meeting a couple of weeks ago with some of her neighbours who, I think, bloody hell, haven't I been talking about phosphate for ages? Surely everyone knows, and most of the attendees didn't know any of the stuff that I was talking about. So there are a big proportion of the landowners in the county that haven't understood what the issue is and how they may contribute to it. That's a big learning point for us at the Hub and for the Farm Herefordshire Partnership to try and understand how we can improve the level of understanding around. We had 7 of the group members doing media training last week, which was very entertaining, and it just helps again for us to advocate and try and communicate what is happening on farm, because there's a lot and perhaps you don't hear about it, and that's, you know, shame on us for not sharing what's being done. My last slide, not exactly on the Herefordshire Agri group, but many of those members are also part of a landscape recovery bid that was submitted by Herefordshire Rural Hub in partnership with the Wildlife Trust and the Wye Valley AONB. We're still waiting the outcome, so you can take this with a pinch of salt at the moment, but it just reiterates the appetite within the farming community to do things differently if the support and opportunities are presented to them. So the landscape recovery element of our new environmental land management scheme from DEFRA is about trying to do more transformational land management change, longer term interventions. We're trying to get into a 2-year development phase where those landowners, you can see mapped here, would be able to access and secure private financing to support their farming operations on the main sort of channel of the Wye and the Lug and the Froome. So please everybody keep your fingers crossed, because I think we're supposed to hear on Thursday this week whether that land is going to go into a landscape recovery bid, and if it is successful we'll be trying to expand that across a much wider area of the county. That's me, so you are finished for lunch, I believe. Just trying to reiterate, there is a huge amount happening. You're going to see a big social media campaign around that report, but please do, follow more of us on social media so that you can see the information we are trying to communicate about agriculture's work in the Wye. Thank you.
We're going to break for lunch now and come back for the panel after lunch. So there we go. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, very good. Okay, thank you for all still being here. That's great. And I just want to say, well done and thank you to the catering. Absolutely astonishingly good. And yeah, good job there. Right, so we've got one more session, which will be Jenny Grubb talking about Welsh water. This was going to be regulation water, but it'll just be water. Jenny Grubb is a fabulous person who's the River Quality Liaison Officer at Dŵr Cymru Welsh Water. So over to you, Jenny.
Thank you very much. I don't know what I've done to deserve that, but I'll try and say something informative. Thanks very much for having me. My name's Jenny. I'm a River Quality Liaison Manager for Dŵr Cymru Welsh Water. I also sit on the Wye Catchment Partnership and the Nutrient Management Board and the Statutory Officers Group, so I've got a huge involvement in the Wye Catchment. I'm going to talk a little bit, and I'm also going to introduce my colleague Liz Davis, who's at the front, who's going to join me for the last couple of slides to talk about our clean water operations. So that I'll talk mainly about the waste side of the business, and then Liz is going to come and talk about some of the work we're doing to improve the river catchment for abstraction purposes. So I've specifically chosen in this presentation not to put up the SAGES modelling again. Those of you who have been involved in the Wye catchment for a while will have seen those pie charts endlessly. I think Jessie Norman brought up the 21% contribution figure earlier, and I think there's more value to be had from talking about some of the other things that we do as an industry and some of the projects that are currently ongoing. Apologies if I run out of puff. It's not nerves. I'm 7 months pregnant. So I sometimes have to catch my breath. Great. So starting off with Dŵr Cymru, we're the only not-for-profit water company in the country. I think that's really important to point out because there's been a lot of interest in the media recently, and it's one of the things that we can hold up as an example that the money hasn't left our company and gone as dividends to shareholders. It's been reinvested in our infrastructure. That's not to say there isn't a lot more to do, but it is to say that that's you know, the majority, you know, all of the money that we make is reinvested on behalf of our customers. We're a very heavily regulated industry. We have a financial regulator, and they tell us not only where we can spend money, but where we must spend money. We also have the Drinking Water Inspectorate, Natural Resources Wales, and Environment Agency, and they look after quality of the drinking water, but then also our interactions with the environment. As I say, I've chosen to speak about the actions we're taking specifically in the catchment already, so I'm going to talk about the schemes that are in progress. I've mentioned the SAGE statistics, say we're about 21% of the apportionment of the excess phosphorus going into that river. And actually there are already a huge amount of works in progress to remove that phosphorus coming out of our wastewater treatment works. So between 2020 and 2025, we're completing 11 major schemes at wastewater treatment works to introduce new phosphorus removal technology. The ones in green have already been completed, and the ones in black are in progress. The total cost of these schemes is about £63 million, and that's just within the Wye catchment, and it's part of our wider investment programme to introduce phosphorus removal technologies in those failing special area of conservation catchments. I wanted to talk, I'm often asked why can't you do it quicker? So there's a lot of work going on in progress. There will be even more work from 2025 to 2030, but people often say, well, why can't you do it quicker? Why are they in progress? Why can't you just go and put it in now? And what I wanted to talk about was some of the practical difficulties or practical challenges of implementing this technology in the Wye catchment. So I'm going to talk about Lempster Wastewater Treatment Works. Lempster Wastewater Treatment Works is a £12 million investment project that started in December 2022. It's due to complete spring 2024, so we're nearly there. We're installing phosphorus removal technology, mainly the installation of nitrifying sand filters. These are, I'll show you them in a minute. They look like giant sort of canisters that we put on site. We're also putting in additional chemical dosing equipment and refurbishing the inlet of the works. To do that, we have to upgrade things like the power connections to the site. So instead of it's just saying, we'll stick this phosphate stripper on the back end of our works, there's actually quite a big invested sort of process to making sure this phosphorus is coming out of the wastewater. One of the challenges at Lempster is that we are working in very close proximity to a railway line, which means we can't put cranes over the top of it. We have a very high water table, which means that every time we dig down to put in footings or concrete, we have to get rid of the water that's coming out of the ground. We are working around dry weather windows. Massive water retaining excavations are required to make sure that we can get that equipment into the ground. So I think I wanted to just impress upon you some of the engineering challenges that come with phosphorus removal. A really important point is that this site also has to be kept in compliance the whole time that we're working on it. It's still an operating wastewater treatment works. We can't say, sorry, we're doing building work, the permit conditions go out the window and we're going to discharge whatever. It has to be operating to its required capacity at all times whilst we're building. So it's a live site that we're building on as well. Okay, I've decided to talk about storm overflows, which is potentially quite a controversial topic. But what I wanted to do is just get some information out there about what they are, why we have them, and what we're going to do about them, because they're obviously a really big issue and have attracted a lot of public attention. So, storm overflows exist as a feature of the current wastewater network, rather. You'll know that Welsh Water hasn't existed in the current form. It has, forever. Glas Cymru was founded in 2001, and before that you'd have had privatised water from 1991, and before that you'd have had the water boards and the river authorities. So we've inherited this network of wastewater treatment, of sewer networks rather. People often talk about this Victorian designed sewer, and I think that's a little bit of a misnomer. So the Victorians did decide that this was the way they thought their sewer network should operate, but up until the 1970s these types of networks were still put in as standard. So we're fighting a legacy that's well over 100 years old, but was being carried on, well up to 1970, sort of 75, 76. So what are they? Hopefully this diagram puts it in some sort of context. A combined sewer is one that takes both the rainwater that falls on your driveways, on your houses, in your gardens, as well as wastewater from the toilets, dishwashers, washing machines, baths, showers. And it puts them into the same pipe to take them away to the wastewater treatment works. Now, anybody can see now that's probably not a good idea because they react to the weather. When you have a lot of rain, your sewer pipe is incredibly full. And what you need in that pipe is a pressure release. If you didn't have a pressure release, when you had big storm events, the waste would come back up, whatever pipe the wastewater and stormwater mixed together would come back up somewhere else, either through a manhole or through a toilet. So they built in these things called storm overflows. And they are specifically designed that only in those big storm conditions they would overtop and go into the environment. Now, we know they don't just go off in the most extreme storm conditions. This is information that we've learned. So we've got about 2,300 storm overflows in Dŵr Cymru's operating area. The vast majority are permitted by the environmental regulator, and we monitor these and report them to our regulator. Importantly, spills can't be reported in advance. They're unplanned because they're a result of the weather. We started installing monitors on them in about 2015. And what we found, Welsh Water was actually the first company to commit to installing monitors on all their storm overflows. And what we found from 2015 to now was that these things that we thought were operating in storm conditions and providing this pressure release to the system operate a lot more than they should do. And nobody within Welsh Water will tell you that we're happy with the performance of our storm overflows. Nobody will tell you that. What's happened is we've got this new data. We've gone from having no data on how often a storm overflow operates to having 2,300 pieces of data every 15 minutes recording how often these storm overflows go off. So, we've learnt that they go off far too often. So what are we going to do about it? Well, working with Welsh Government and with DEFRA, in fact, the water industry is adhering to this programme called SOAF, the Storm Overflow Assessment Framework. And what we're doing is looking at those assets that are the highest spillers, those that go off sort of more than 40 times a year, and taking them through this 5-stage investigation and delivery process. And what we're looking at is prioritising the investment and the work for those that are causing environmental harm, those that are having an environmental impact first. Rather than chasing the numbers of let's get it to 10 spills or let's get it to 3 spills, what we want to do is prioritise spending our customers' money where it's going to have a benefit to the environment or the biggest benefit to the environment. And to do that, we carry out this stage 2, which is the environmental impact investigation. And we've got teams of samplers who go out and sample the ecology up and downstream with kick samples. And we're looking for the invertebrate populations to understand if there's been a chronic impact on the environment from that discharge. The reason it's important to look at the impact on the ecology rather than water sampling is both practicality and sort of logic-based. It can be very challenging to get an exact sample of what's coming out of the storm overflow as it's going off. You've got to wait for the weather, send a sample team out, make sure you're capturing what's coming out into the environment, and then get up and downstream samples at the same time. You might sample for 20 different parameters, dissolved oxygen and BOD and ammonia and phosphorus. You might be looking for all of those things. But actually, what the biota can tell you, what the ecology can tell you, is whether that's had an impact or not. And it's much better to look long-term over a year as to whether there's been a chronic impact on the environment or not. Once we've worked out whether they're having an impact or not, a severe, high, moderate or no impact, we'll take them through this options assessment, cost-benefit analysis to look at the best solution for solving that, reducing the operation of that storm overflow or solving that problem completely, and then taking it through to delivery. There are 137 storm overflows in the whole of the Wye catchment, the wide Wye catchment. That's every tributary and every bit of water that's feeding into that Wye catchment from the Elan Valley to Forest of Dean, I think. 78 of them are under investigation. This will update monthly as we get the results of those investigations through. But to date, 15 of those investigations are complete. 5 of them are having a severe impact. That means those 5 assets are going through as top priority for improvement and investment in our next business plan. And in fact, that work is ongoing now. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about phosphorus programme. I've talked a little bit about what storm overflows are and why we have them. And I'm going to talk about the other thing we can do about storm overflows, and that's about the availability of information. So in 2023, we launched a swim survey and said, well, where are people using the rivers recreationally? We asked 16 questions. We paid for Facebook advertising, we put it on swimming groups, we got in contact with the Blue Tits, all sorts, and said, tell us where you're using the waters. Tell us what your concerns are about using the waters. We want to know. And we had quite a good response, nearly 2,000 respondents, but some quite detailed responses that included locations that people are swimming as well. And we've used this information to gather a list of what we call high amenity waters. So we have bathing waters, which are those that are designated around the other coasts, and one in Llyn actually, in North Wales. And now we also have a list of high amenity assets. And what we've decided to do is launch real-time spill reporting. So within an hour, on our website, you will be able to see whether an asset has operated. And the reason that we prioritise these high amenity and bathing waters is that they're going to make up phase 1 of our launch of this map. So from January 2024, which is very soon, we are going to be, you can see all the assets in proximity of those high amenity and bathing waters, whether they've spilt within an hour of them operating. This is a step up from the existing system, which some of you might know, sort of Surfers Against Sewage, Safer Seas and Rivers app. This will give you a lot more information. So it will say not just if it's operating or if it's been operated in the last 24 hours, but how long did it go off for, how many times has it spilt this calendar year, how many times has it spilt this season, all those sorts of information. Critically, what we're providing people is greater visibility of our assets and how they're operating. An additional source of information for their own personal risk assessment, but we're not confirming bathing water quality or providing people advice on when to swim. Phase 2 of this project will roll out in March 2025 and include all of the rest of our assets. So you'll be able to see within an hour if something's operated in your vicinity. Apologies, I'm storming through this because I want to get to Liz's work on the catchment as well. Here we are. Liz, would you like to come up and have a chat about drinking water catchments? Fab. I'm going to sit, but I'll stand back up again in a bit.
Okay, so can you all hear me okay? Yeah. So I'm from, I suppose, the other side of the business, the drinking water or clean water side, and I sit within the catchment team, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do as the catchment team and how we work to safeguard our drinking water supply. So we source from over 120 catchments across England and Wales. Of those 120 catchments, that's 11,000 kilometres squared. There's 61 water treatment works working across those catchments, treating raw water to provide clean water to everyone's tap. And we own less than 5% of that land. So as the catchment team, our objective is to work with everyone and anyone within those catchments that can have an effect on water quality. Now, as you can imagine, there's a lot of variety of land use across those catchments. So my role, as well as the other catchment coordinators across England and Wales, is to work with agriculture, industry, forestry, all sorts of different land uses that could potentially have an impact on water quality. So coming a little bit closer to home, we've got the River Wye, that's why we're here. It's, as you can see, we're all the way up the top there near the Eland Dams. We come all the way down to our final abstraction point at Monmouthshire. It's a big old catchment. It's one of our biggest catchments, over 2,700 kilometres squared. And it serves a population of over 30,500 properties. It is a safeguard zone, so a non-statutory designated safeguard zone. And the reason for that, or the initial reason for that, was pesticides. So our drinking water limit for pesticides, we have strict, stringent guidelines around what is deemed acceptable. It's 0.1 micrograms per litre. So to give you an idea of scale, that's one baked bean in 24 million tins. So any, there you go. So yeah, any kind of, if pesticides are picked up at all in our water treatment works, we're aware of that, and we need to treat those out in order for it to be able to be consumed by the general public. So catchment engagement, what have we been up to? So I am very quickly whistling through this because I'm probably short on time. So there's a lot I could say on this slide, so bear with me, I'm trying to condense it down into a couple of minutes. So our farmer-led water groups, or the work that we've been doing with some farmer-led water groups, I should say. So there's two of these at the top of the Wye. One of them is a poultry group, so obviously focusing around that livestock sector, and the Upper Wye water group. Both working to a similar sort of ilk, focusing on sort of nutrients and pesticide management, nutrients and manure management. I will say a little bit more about the farmer-led water groups on the next slide. Our Pest Smart campaign, where we've run a pesticide disposal scheme which saw 27,000 kilograms of unwanted pesticides taken off from across our catchments. The weed wiper trial, which again is a bit of kit, it was free hire to all farmers who were kind of upstream of Llys Wen, so again top of the Wye, but we were seeing elevated levels of a broadleaf herbicide called MCPA, which is particularly difficult to treat. So with a weed wiper, the only pesticide that you can put within that is glyphosate. So what we were doing with that trial is working with farmers to then reduce that risk of MCPA, so they were using the weed wiper and obviously using glyphosate as a better alternative to MCPA. Breathe. And then we've got a public awareness campaign. We have been running a public awareness campaign since 2021, which is predominantly aimed at gardeners and homeowners, and it was promoting the better use or safer, smarter use of pesticides with that sector. And we've also, again, in partnership with some farmers at the top of the Wye, took part in the Cryptosporidium EIP, European Innovation Partnership. Crypto is obviously one of the bacteria that, if it gets into drinking water, can really cause some real problems. And what we were doing, it's quite widely documented in cattle and the effects it can have on calf and calf scours. But actually, we were looking at it from a sheep perspective, and if there was a link there with water quality. And to cut a long story short, I'm told that the final conclusion of that study was that crypto is essentially everywhere. Yeah. So, yes, coming back to our farmer groups, conscious of time, so I will try and summarise this as quickly as I can. A group of farmers that have existed and have we've been working with for a long time are the Beacons Water Group, who are a group of farmers in Brecon Beacons National Park, or Banau Prycheiniog, to use the right name. As Welsh Water, our challenge was we wanted to engage with farmers to take these proactive steps to protect water quality, but also draw on the farmer skills and experiences and work with them to identify these solutions and a sort of a win-win scenario. So what we found is this method has worked the best for us. It empowers farmers to seek opportunities or work with each other to sort of come up with opportunities that would benefit themselves, the business, as well as water quality. The group have been going for a long time now. They've had a number of outcomes which you can see are listed there. So they're the first community interest group as part of the Brecon Beacons mega catchment. Some of the actions that we've done with the group there, we've worked with them to produce a whole farm hydrological flow map, so they've actually mapped the whole farm with a bit of technology which shows where high-risk flow lines are likely to accumulate water across their farm, and then working with them to input land management practices that would then reduce that risk of runoff, obviously then potentially affecting water quality. Weather stations is another valuable tool, so we've put a couple of weather stations up with these guys and sensors, so they're receiving live data from these weather stations, which goes straight to an app, which basically gives them a tick or a cross about whether it's good conditions to go out and spread manures. So again, another benefit to water quality from a water company point of view. Next steps. So as I mentioned, we have our two sort of, or we're working with two groups at the top of the Wye, which are, let's say, a bit newer than the Beacons Water Group. So what we'd like to do is replicate what we've been doing with the Beacons Water Group. Again, piloting this sort of farmer-led approach and using a facilitator within that. So it's very much a sort of hands-off approach from Welsh Water. We're not telling farmers what to do, essentially. We're working with them and with a facilitator for them to come up with ideas, as I've said, which will benefit them as well as water quality. That being said, we are always looking for existing groups or new cluster groups. So I know there's plenty of farmers in the room, and I know with the last presentation with the Herefordshire Agri Group, we are always looking to work with future groups. So yes, I don't bite. By all means, come and have a chat with me. I won't get you to sign your life away, but yes, if you're interested, by all means, come and have a chat with me.
So we've gone through a lot. Sorry, we've gone through a lot. I'm going to summarise in a single slide. We've gone through the schemes that are in progress on the Wye, some of those challenges to implementing those schemes on the Wye, our storm overflow strategy, the storm overflow map alive, but also really pointed out that we're seeking collaboration opportunities on the clean water side with landowners and farmers through our catchment team, and potentially as an opportunity for a similar group on the Wye as the Beacons group. Thank you. Is it all right?
So now we're going to move on to the
too much content, I think. But any
questions, and the panel will be chaired by Ross Cook, who's the Corporate Director of Economy and Environment for Herefordshire Council. Thanks, Ross, for doing this.
Okay, thank you.
And the panellists are the people that you've heard speaking in the last set of sessions. So if I could just ask you, if possible, to keep your questions as brief as you can so we get as many questions in as possible. Thanks very much. Ross, over to you.
Thanks, Alyssa. I feel slightly disappointed you didn't introduce me as superb, the same as Jenny. But
that goes without saying, I think.
Thanks. So yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ross Cook, Corporate Director for Economy and Environment at Herefordshire Council, which means I sort of deal with everything that we're talking around here in the room. We've also referenced a few times planning. We've talked around human investment. We've talked around housing. We've talked around environmental health. We've talked around all sorts of things that we're trying to pull together. So the conference has been really useful for me in that respect to hear all the different voices and different concerns today. I appreciate that Alyssa will do some summing up at the end, but I just wanted to reframe this session as to where we've got to and some of the things that we've heard this morning and this afternoon. So Patrick talked around litter management and dealing with that in the short and longer term. Sarah then talked around destocking and pathway disruption. Richard talked around the AD and the biogas systems that they're looking at. James talked around litter burning and the ash byproducts from that. Bridie then talked around some of the issues around free-range management. Rachel talked around some of the challenges we've got around trying to deal with the economy and how we keep things growing in a safe way, but also talked around the wetlands product that we've been delivering. Stephen talked around water management, both in terms of across his land, but also from adjoining land and the sort of path that takes back into the watercourse, as well as some of the issues around baling manure and some of the ideas that they've got around that. Martin put the challenge out to the room for any one person to stand up and say we could solve it alone, and I think we correctly all sat and said, no, we need to work together, which was the key point of today's session as well. And then Kate has talked around improving engagement, some of the monitoring they're doing, and some of the sort of data that we can use to help help the conversations going forward, particularly around land management and how we do that. And then Jenny and Liz have just talked through some of the challenges they've got around water management, drinking water, but also some of the solutions they've got there as well. So just to sort of reframe, we've heard a heck of a lot. I know there were some questions from this morning that you're all keen to do. Alyssa set me the task of trying to keep it to a question. I know you're all keen to make statements as well, and we're very keen to hear that as well, but we've only got sort of 40 minutes for this session, so if we can keep it to questions. And I will also try and just bring in a few different voices as well. I know some are keen to come back as well, and I'll come back to that, but if we've got anyone who didn't get a chance to ask a question this morning to start us off, the team are ready with their roving mics. I can see a gentleman there in the blue sweater to start us off. Thank you.
Can you? Right.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm a councillor from the Forest of Dean. My portfolio is planning. Just to put it in perspective, I had 10 years in the water industry, clean and dirty side, and then I was a farming advisor, so I've been thinking about this for a long time. So my question is, land use planning. I think the solution is beefing up the National Planning Policy Framework to actually restrict certain operations on vulnerable land. I mean, I know we have a little bit with NVZs, but not enough. I mean, for example, if a Hereford authority were allowed to, maybe they wouldn't have allowed so many intensive poultry units in one small catchment. So the question, quite simply, is what's your view on land use planning as a long-term solution to this? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody want to go first on that? Kate?
Yeah, there was this reference this morning to sort of the need for regulatory frameworks, and I think that point fits within that. If there's a regulatory framework that limits a catchment load, we have to then farm within it. We have to have all of those nutrient loads set. And until that exists, we can't quantify the improvements that are being made on farms. We can't secure funding to try and work down to that level. So I personally think potentially, yes, there is space for that. And I think there would be benefits for us as an industry to try and understand what that looks like for our future.
Yeah, thanks, Martin.
I think it's a very dangerous scenario when you start to regulate to that level. There would be, I would suggest, and I'm only putting it out there as a sort of a contra to your conversation, that if you tentatively nationalise farmland, it becomes a question of ownership. And I would hope that through not just voluntarily, but through culture change, that might come on its own rather than become some overly regulatory framework. Although I agree with Kate, the regulations are somewhat lax at the moment.
Okay, thanks, Martin. I know you're keen to come back. I just want to hear some other voices. I will come back to you in a second. We've got a gentleman here just in front of us.
Thank you. My name is Peter Garrett. I'm a retired water resources engineer, and I'm currently working with Andrew for CPRE. A very specific question for Jenny. Very interesting presentation. I'm testing sites on the Garran Brook, which is quite severely polluted, as you know. Apart from the agricultural runoff, about which we've heard a lot this morning, and which we all know is kind of the crux of the problem, there are also clusters of very old septic tanks which have not been looked at for donkey's years. And I'm referring specifically in this instance to Walcott Hill, which is not on mains sanitation, understandably so, because it's a long way from the main road. But this is obviously, I can see from my testing that the effluent from these tanks is having effect. And the very specific question is whether Welsh Water are looking at these clusters of old septic tanks with a view to putting in perhaps small-scale tailor-made treatment plants as an option to connection with the main system, which is obviously going to be very difficult in some cases. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. There's a couple of questions in there. One is around ownership of those septic tanks. So where they're Dŵr Cymru assets, we're looking to address where we have old legacy septic tanks that we might have adopted in bygone years. Yes, we're looking at replacing those with sort of more robust systems, or the sort of something that's modern and up to date. It's very difficult where we don't own them, where they're private households. And that is something that sort of comes down to NRW and EA as the regulator to say this needs replacing, or quite a lot of people don't even know they have them, let alone being emptied and checked and checked for maintenance every year.
You only get to find you have one when you apply for a planning application.
Yes, or try to sell your house. Yeah. So we'll work as best we can with the regulator, and where there are assets that belong to Dŵr Cymru, certainly we'll be looking at those. And there's a few lines, I think, in the next business plan, specifically looking at Dŵr Cymru-owned sort of small-scale treatment works that could be classed as septic tanks. But where they're owned privately, we would struggle to get involved unless there was an application to connect, and then it would go into our business as usual connection sort of process.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. Take the gentleman at the front. Thank you.
A very simple question for Rachel Joy. Rachel, how many chickens would need to be removed from the catchment to account for 0.023% of the phosphorus surplus?
I'd have to do the calculation.
Well, I did a rough back-of-the-envelope calculation. I reckon it's about 5,000 chickens. And I've got a question for Martin. Can you give me any recent examples of where voluntary culture change has delivered significant improvement to agricultural pollution problems?
I think I probably could. Voluntary being in what respect? If it's totally and utterly voluntary?
Yes, not. I work in the food industry. We're regulated too, believe it or not, and it's mandatory. There's no voluntary about it. You have to comply. Yeah.
Without anything compulsorily voluntary or totally voluntary. I would say there's a project in Lincolnshire at the moment which has gone on around water quality, and I find that's quite a voluntary group of farmers. If you'd like to look that up.
So there's one group in Lincolnshire.
That's one group in Lincolnshire. If you want an example.
Have delivered nationwide change through voluntary effort.
Nationwide change. That's a very big question there for Tom. So.
I was just asking because maybe it's time for a bit of enforcement routine.
During my previous role at the YNS Foundation, I was involved with the Curl Brook project, Go Wild in the Curl. Some members you've heard from today, and that approach was voluntary with the farmers. There was about 24 of them, and the water monitoring was undertaken. They had a lot of support from Lucinda Lewis as their sort of facilitator. They reduced their phosphate losses in the catchment by 25%, I believe. It might be higher, unless James can correct me. So it can be done, and it has happened. But the funding doesn't exist.
You talked about voluntary. I was trying to find something that was voluntary for free. I doubt that anything is done within the food industry voluntarily for free.
Avara are exporting their manure on a voluntary basis. They have not been mandated to do it from a regulatory point. There's another example of voluntary work.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll go the lady in the middle there. The microphone on the other side. I've seen you at the back. I will come to you in a second.
Thank you. Helen Hamilton. It's a bit disappointing, and I'm sure it's not your fault that we haven't got the regulatory agencies here. But we haven't heard any mention really about the work of the regulatory agencies and the question of lack of enforcement, I think in particular of the diffuse agricultural pollution regulations. Do you agree, I'm sure Martin won't, that actually enforcing those regulations would make a significant difference?
Thanks, Ed. Before you do, Martin, Rachel, did you want to come in first?
Can I, if I may, come on the wider point of regulation and planning that was picked up in Councillor Fels's question and is part picked up in Helen Hamilton's question. Is there a place for more regulation? I think certainly very quickly flocks under 30,000 should be brought into regulation. That's something that could be done relatively quickly. I think there should be an extension of the regulation of anaerobic digesters. The large ones and certain ones are part of the system, the others aren't. They sit outside of monitoring. Should national policy, planning policy, be looked at in more detail on its environmental impact? Well, I don't think anybody would say that that's a bad thing, but it has to sit inside the context of national food security, national food production, economic impact, to be weighed alongside. The river is one of a number of important facets in our focus here today. Regulation could go further. It could mandate how much phosphate needs to come out of each individual field. But in order to do that, we need a proper scientific assessment of how much does need to come out of each individual field. And we don't have that yet. We need a proper scientific assessment of the options for actually removing it out of field. So are there too many chickens in the catchment? Probably yes, but we don't know because nobody's worked out what the optimum is if in a well-managed system. And at the moment, we don't have a well-managed system. We have a system that is causing environmental harm. So yeah, is there a place for more regulation? I'm going to say it because the farmers won't say it, because farmers won't put their hands up for more regulation, but I do think there needs to be another look in this area, but it needs to come out of a proper process with proper engagement with the people that are actually impacted by it, so that we don't have unintended consequences in fixing one problem.
Thanks, Rachel. I think. Yeah, so I think the challenge was back to the farmers and Martin and then Stephen afterwards.
Yeah, I'll dispute the fact that I think Martin will disagree. There are 295 EA inspections have been carried out this year to the beginning of November. Are they worthwhile? I would question some of their validity, and I would question some of their outcomes, because the regulations by which they work are possibly limited. And as you'd have seen last year, a lot of letters went out around land use. Again, EA shot themselves in the foot a little bit, and I'm sure if anybody's here from EA, they'd admit they did. It was badly backed up with the science. And so there is a need for regulation. Of course there is. I cannot sit here as a farmer and defend bad practice, and nor will I, whichever hat I'm wearing. However, there is a very, as we've shown with Kate's phosphate loading, the difference between good and bad is significantly massive, and how you target that and how you reach those people, I think perhaps could be done better.
Yeah, again, in a practical sense, I've had a visit on my farm by Sir James Bevan, who's Chief Executive of the Environment Agency, who had Harvey Bradshaw, the Operations Director of the Environment Agency #2, and they say, well, you know, they want to work with farmers, and then you get these letters sent out, and it's in a season where it's been very wet, and there's lots of reasons why there's a brown field, and it's not necessarily that the farmer hasn't planted something. It could be that they've tried and it's failed. I'm in a scheme, an environmental scheme, where you've got to leave it as a fallow. And so in 2021, I had to fill out 4 years worth of data on everything that we had cropped, every poultry number, every ton of muck had to be allocated. You know, so there is an awful lot going on, but it's very difficult within this environment because it's so changeable and variable. You know, just think of this autumn, to actually pin it all down. So they are there working on it. It is happening, but perhaps, as Martin says, it's not to a great degree. And they haven't got the resources to have the boots on the ground necessarily. They're relying more on LiDAR information, which is from a satellite. And there's some guy in Loughborough with a can of Red Bull and a bag of Doritos sat there thinking, oh, we'll ping him, you know. And yet I could stand in my bridge in Erdsland on a Saturday morning and see that the river is running brown and the mill stream's running clear, and there's only 3 fields between where the mill stream comes out. So there are local things where it could be improved.
We work quite closely with the Environment Agency at the Hub, trying to increase the impact of their regulatory work. As I mentioned, we've been doing a lot of farmer meetings and events, and there is a very low level of understanding of what some of the requirements are on farm. They've been sort of introduced en masse by DEFRA without really communicating to their stakeholders what those requirements are, and we're trying to pick up some of that slack on behalf of DEFRA, and the Environment Agency can feel the impact of that. I would say that the farming rules for water are not particularly effective. They have lots of get-out-of-jail-free clauses in terms of what's practical, what's reasonable, and that means that when the Environment Agency actually do find issues, it's very hard to do an enforcement case against it because there are these get-out-of-jail-free cards built into the legislation. If those could be addressed, I think most of the partners in Farm Herefordshire would be very supportive of those rules being enforced in an effective manner. They encourage us to be more resource efficient. It, you know, helps drive our profitability as farm businesses to make sure that we're not losing nutrients recklessly. I think you're right. We won't disagree that we think right regulation is needed. I was just going to say about Rachel's point to do with permitting. We've had that discussion with Noble and Stonegate, who are 2 large free-range egg processors who source from the Wye. They equally are very supportive of the permitting threshold being lowered to include more of their sites, so that they in turn can ask their growers to meet those standards. Without them there, they can't ask them to do it. So there's will in all sorts of places to do better.
Okay, thank you. I saw a hand right at the back. Did I see first? And I'll come back to the front here.
Thanks, Ross. To those that seek more regulation, be careful what you wish for. Martin, another gentleman in the room, reminded me that when we proposed putting a 10-metre buffer strip on the SSI boundaries, Martin got the plough out the next day, or so he tells me, regularly, almost every time I see him. So let's be careful about regulation. There's a place for it, as Rachel has said, better baseline regulation. But equally, on the other side of the coin, history is littered with failed voluntary initiatives. Martin, I disagree. I can't think of a single one in my career which has actually worked. Catchment-sensitive farming, millions of pounds spent, fail. The situation is getting worse, not better. So my question to the panel is, are we up collectively? Are we up for the pace, scale and urgency of land use and land management change required to turn this around? I haven't heard much today that has convinced me that collectively we are. I want to hear something that leaves me with a message of hope. Getting the LR2 bid over the line on Thursday will be good, Kate. Let's keep our fingers and toes firmly crossed. But what's going to shift? Is it culture, Martin? Is it will? Is it money? Money would be good, but the Chancellor's just stripped 20 billion out of public spending to spend on all of us in penny packets. So what's it going to be? I'm going to be dead in 30 years' time, so are most of us in the room, not all of us. But I'll be feeding the worms. What's it going to be? Is it going to be the same in 30 years' time as it was in 1995? In fact, it's worse than it was in 1995. What's it going to be? What's going to be different?
Okay, thank you. Who'd like to come first? Rachel first, then.
I agree, and in one way it's very difficult to offer hope given the scale of the challenge. So in saying what I say, I don't want to raise false hope. But at the moment we have a catchment partnership, we have a nutrient management board, we have various other groups. We have a commitment to a diffuse water pollution plan, we have a nutrient management plan, we have a catchment plan, we have the Severn River Basement Management Plan, we have the Minister coming along saying that she's going to give a special plan for Lower Wye. I think that tells you something about the current state of thinking, which is there is not in England or Wales sufficient ministerial grip, leading to a very, very clear team being brought together to actually work through this systemically, not once a month in a meeting and then going back and doing the day job, and then trying to cobble together a report for your 3 monthly meeting. That, my folks, is not expensive. In the scheme of things, £500,000 to £1 million over the next 2 years, which you could probably raise with crowdfunding, the level of commitment that we have within the county, even if the government won't come up with it. But we're not talking about big bucks to get one clear plan that brings together all of the wonderful initiatives that we've heard about, flushes out all of the issues where there are still challenges, gets us to the right science, the right solution, the right set of regulations. That is a consistent piece of teamwork that needs to be led, well managed and gripped from the top.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. I'm conscious of time. As Martin, sorry, Martin. Do you want to come back?
Right, I'll go back to James. James mentions the SSSI, and I brought it up with him, and I take the mick out of him because he was the guy that stood in the Green Dragon and announced the SSSI in April. I can't remember the date. James, was it 1990? And 95. And by the autumn, the majority of the river meadows in Herefordshire were ploughed because the date was given. That is a consequence of legislation badly brought in, thinking it was doing the right thing, finding it was doing the wrong thing. And I remind him very often of it. Okay, I mentioned agriculture. Culture is the thing that will change what goes on. The total income from farming in Wales matches the BPS budget, or their payout budgets our dole checks, as you might call them, every year. The similar thing happens in England over the past 20 years. That dole check has matched, to a degree, the output from agriculture. That has now been taken away. Particularly in Wales, it has been taken away and it will hurt. That is a cultural change. It has also happened within England in that dole check has been taken away. And I'll take Herefordshire slightly out of that group. Herefordshire is known as a very hungry county. It is a very, very forward-thinking county. It is a very, very hungry county, not in terms of empty bellies, but in terms of ambition. Herefordshire is probably an overachiever in agriculture in the country, and therefore it probably will take longer for that culture to change based on hardship. And those are the cultural facts. We can jump up and down all you like. Those are the cultural facts.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Gentleman here.
Hi, my name is Nick Sherwood. I've been working in sustainability in Herefordshire for the last 30 years, including this building. I just have a very specific question for Jenny and for Liz. You didn't mention biosolids, and although we constrain to things that don't concern us today, like microplastics, etc., could you, at the very least, give us your view on the dangers, or hopefully not the dangers, of biosolids going forward in terms of nutrients? Thanks.
Absolutely. That's a great question. Thanks for bringing it up. So Dŵr Cymru take 100% of our wastewater sludges through to an advanced anaerobic digestion process. So we have 4 digesters, one in Wrexham, one in Cardiff East, one in Cogmores, and one in Avon near Port Talbot. And 100% of our sewage sludge goes there for advanced digestion. It's superheated as part, well, it's heated as part of that process, which gives us a kill of salmonella and E. coli that we would want to see from a good biosolid product. And obviously we generate energy either through electricity, which we use to run the plants, or gas directly back to grid, which is what happens in Wrexham, in 5 Fords. We then have a team of agricultural scientists, and their job is to have a relationship with farmers, and we pay for field testing as well. So we'll go and test a field in multiple places that a farmer, they can apply to us to have biosolids to spread on their land. We then pay for the lab testing of those soils and hold the results as well to make sure that where they would like to spread is suitable to have biosolids applied to them. Our agricultural scientists also then do risk mapping to make sure that where the biosolids are held at the tip site and also where it's intending to be spread is not a risk to a watercourse and within all the required legislation. We hold ourselves, we are accredited to the Biosolids Assurance Scheme as well, BAS. We have a certification in terms of how that's used. One thing we can do is be very picky about where our biosolids are spread. It's a really in-demand product because of the price of fertiliser has gone up. We pay for the lab testing and we pay for transport and we put it on we take it to a farmer. So it means we can be incredibly picky about where we spread that biosolid. We've stopped advertising for farmers to come to us because they want it. So we do have a really robust process around how we spread that biosolid. But I will say as a business, we're looking at where we need to adjust that process, particularly around the SAP catchments. Although I think the refocus work, at least the first batch, showed that biosolid contribution was a relatively small part of the contribution of excess nutrients to the Wye. We still need to make sure what we're doing is sort of being done in the most sustainable way.
I think what you've confirmed is that there is a risk there that we need to keep an eye on.
Well, absolutely. We have an assurance process. We have mapping and records that go back, as long as we've been doing it for, and we have that testing as well to sort of back up what product we're putting on the land and what land it's going on to. But you're right. It's I wouldn't see it as a significant risk, but it's certainly one that we keep track of as a business and are reviewing regularly.
Okay, thank you, Kate.
Jenny, perhaps the protocols being developed for use of poultry manure and increasing the visibility of the crop need and where it's being spread with GPS data that can be interrogated more widely would be
make that data more available
be very useful for us as well to build our confidence in where that biosolid is being spread.
I'll make a note. I think that's fair.
Okay, thank you. I think we've got maybe 2 minutes left. I've got Jamie first. And then depend on
Thank you, Ross.
time.
Jamie Orsi, Chief Executive of Herefordshire Wildlife Trust. As Kate and others have mentioned, we're part of the Farm Herefordshire Partnership, but my question takes us a slightly different direction. For those on the panel, we have 7,500 members, CPRE, Herefordshire, many others, citizen scientists doing a lot. What would be your ask of the citizen, so to speak, the member of the public, to contribute to long-term solutions that would help you and help your perspective of what next? Where should ordinary people, so to speak, go in terms of making a bridge-building effort with the industry?
I was going to go, Bridie, you've not had a chance to respond. I don't want to put you on the spot now, but... Shall I come back to you?
Yeah, come back to me.
Jenny looked like she's ready to go.
I've got loads of asks. Yeah.
I was trying to spread it out a bit, but Jenny, go first.
Sorry.
And then,
People's awareness of the systems that they have and the systems that they use. So things like, this is going to sound really obvious and stupid, don't flush things down the toilet that shouldn't be flushed down. Major cause of pollution and pollution incidents for us is blockages of the sewage network caused by fat, oil and grease and wet wipes. That sounds really silly, but they are a significant contributor to pollution problems. And also looking at where your house is connected to the sewer network. I talked about combined systems, combined sewerage systems. People often don't know that their surface water is going into a wastewater network, perhaps. So just being conscious of where our houses are connected and where our waste is going can make a huge impact, especially if everybody's on the same page.
I've thought of an answer now,
Okay.
which is just... so I feel like there is such a divide within our rural community between our farmers and our consuming public, and I think the general public should try and talk to their farmers and have communication with their farmers and let them know that they care, that they're interested in how their food is produced. I think that conversation is really important and needs to keep happening.
I think that some very simple things. One is keep campaigning, keep the pressure up, keep making the noise if you're passionate about the river. The other is that there is a huge amount of volunteering opportunities, particularly through your organisation, for where nature-based solutions are put in. There are opportunities there, and yet the dialogue needs to improve, doesn't it, between the different parts of the community. We need to build a better understanding, and therefore if in our events we can build that in to the kind of events that you're doing, Jamie, there's a huge opportunity there to build on this in lots of small ways, in lots of small places.
Yeah, only send volunteers along if they're as fast as the Wye and Usk ones, please. Yeah, there's a huge amount of skills with your body of volunteers, I'm sure. In farming, we're not brilliant at probably selling ideas or selling what we're doing. So any skills like that can be helped to help us as an industry or individuals. And in fact, it was quite interesting when the volunteers do come in, you always had there's always a great conversation around things and whatever, and they go away hopefully with a bit more enlightenment what's going on. So that's really it.
My ask would be to recognise the farmers that stand up and speak, and it's very easy for the narrative to be negative, and where things go wrong it's very noisy, and when things are done well it's quite quiet. So put more emphasis on the things that are going well to inspire others to follow suit.
My thing's around collaboration. You're in it together. Shouting over a gate at a farmer because you feel he's done something wrong may not be conducive to the response that you wish to get. And if you were to be more